Hi, Maya.
That reminds me, like, I think me and Lisa are the first mentors for Calvin, and we haven't done anything. Calvin, we need to get on that.
What was that, Mark? I missed the first part.
Your audio is pretty low, Mark.
Oh, my audio is low?
Your mic. There you go.
I think me and Lisa are Devlin's first mentors, and we haven't really done anything on that front. We need to get on that.
We just welcomed them a couple days ago, so I don't think you've missed anything yet.
Okay, it looks like everybody's here. If I can see, I'm reading correctly on our list here. So, pull up our agenda. So I'm calling to order our work session for the Hillsboro School District Board. And our first item that we have for our work session is lot consolidations at Eastwood Elementary and Newberry Elementary School with Adam.
Hey, Erica, before we start that, could we have our students introduce themselves? This is their first meeting and just want to make sure they feel welcome and feel awesome for being selected. So maybe if we could just have each student introduce themselves, the school they're representing, and why they were interested in being on a representative to the board.
Great idea.
All right, thank you.
I can see Maya on here. So Maya, if you want to go first, and then they're on, you can just keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi, my name is Maya Smith, and I am representing Century High School. And a reason that I wanted to be on the school board was to specifically advocate for our first language Spanish-speaking students at our schools.
Thank you. Elam, are you on? Just unmute your mic.
Yeah, hi. My name's Ilham. I'm representing Liberty High School, and one of the reasons I am on the board is because I want to advocate for students who are scared to voice what their opinions and change for their school district.
Thank you. And Devlin.
All right. Hi, my name's Devlin Nill. I am representing Liberty High School. I also, one big reason why I wanted to essentially take this position is that I feel like there's a lot of kids at Liberty that have some really good ideas, and I just want to be the voice for the people at Liberty High School, essentially.
Thank you, Devlin. Welcome to the board. Okay, with that, we'll move to our first item with Adam.
I don't see Adam on here, and I have texted him to ask him to jump on, but it doesn't look like he's jumped on yet. Casey, are you prepared?
Maybe Casey?
Yeah, I don't have the details of what Adam was going to cover. I'll try to get a hold of him too. I just know the short version of it about our general lot consolidations that the city and county are making us do. So I'll try to track him down.
Thank you. And maybe we can go on to the next two and go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to say most of the items that we have on here, we can come back to that one since it's an actionable item. So our next item on our agenda is our notice to intent to purchase with Jordan Beverage.
Yes, this item is our notice intent to purchase our one-to-one Chromebooks as we have gone through that process. So this will be the number of devices needed to outfit the middle schools and high schools with new one-to-one devices. And so we are buying through a purchased through CDWG and is off the Intermountain ESD contract. So that's why we need the approval to use that consortium contract.
I'm looking for a motion, board members.
I move that the Board of Directors acknowledge the notice of intent to purchase by use of a cooperative purchasing agreement under the authority of the State of Oregon, ORS 279A.215, permissive cooperative procurements.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I caught Sheehan. So it has been moved by Jackie and seconded by Sheehan. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, please signify by, oh, go ahead, Jackie, if you have a question.
Sorry, I couldn't find my keyboard. Just a question as to the rollout of these and when they will be rolled out and available.
We should know sometime in early August whether they'll arrive prior to school starting. That is, of course, the hope. There are quite a bit of manufacturing and shipping issues going on worldwide, of course. And so that's not a guarantee at this point. And so the CDWG and Lenovo are trying to make that happen for us. We did purchase the additional setup of the devices so that when they arrive, they're basically already enrolled and set up for our school. And so we just be able to hand them out. At that point, they'll also be boxed in a green way so that there's not a box, there's not a single device in each box. There's a larger box with up 10 to 15 devices in it. So it's much easier to unload and get ready to go. So hopefully they'll get here before school starts, but right now we don't have a guarantee of that.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, you had a question as well?
Yeah, just to clarify, just in case for the 75 people who are watching, secondary one-to-one means we get for 7th, 8th, and 7 through 12. Is that right, Jordan?
Yes, that's correct. So we'd already planned on moving forward this before all of the COVID things happened, was moving forward with the one-to-one device rollout. And so that is part of this. And so, yeah, it would be every student would have a take-home device that they would use every day.
And then, Michelle, we're allocating bond dollars to do this because we're buying stuff, not people, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
I guess I just had a question back to our some ways of doing cost recovery. Do these, because we already made this per dollars, can we not do cost recovery due to COVID for doing online distance learning?
I'm super glad that you asked that, Erica, because we can, in fact, and will try to do some cost recovery to mitigate the expense for the bond funds. If we can get any of that refunded, we will.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, board members, please signify by voting aye or nay in the chat for this motion. Okay, the aye votes are Martin Granum, Lisa Allen, Mark Watson, Jackie Spross, Sheehan Kim, Yadira Martinez, and myself. The motion carries. Our next item that we have on our agenda is another notice to intent to purchase with Jordan Beverage as well.
So this goes along with the one-to-one device purchase. This is a software package that would be used as a basically classroom and teaching tool with all of the Chromebooks. Allows the teachers to share things, push things out to the devices, see what students are doing on their devices during their class periods. and be able to work back and forth with students on the Chromebooks. It also gives us our filtering, both when the students have the devices inside of the district and at home. So it just applies a lot of that management of the one-to-one devices that we'll need to use them appropriately. And we're buying this again on a consortium contract through OETC. It's through Lightspeed Systems called their Relay, Lightspeed Relay.
I'm looking for a motion.
I move that the Board of Directors acknowledge the notice of intent to purchase by use of a cooperative purchasing agreement under the authority of the State of Oregon ORS 279 Alpha.215 permissive cooperative contracts.
Second.
Yadira. So it has been moved by Martin and seconded by Yadira. Is there any discussion? See, I only had one follow-up question since we're buying these technology items as well. Is there any plans for us or need for us to get additional hotspots?
We actually have additional of the 1,500 hotspots that we ordered and got on site. We gave out about 1,000 of those. And so we still have about 500 devices that we've currently deactivated. And so we're not paying anything on those, but we can reactivate them at any moment. So we plan on pushing those out in the fall and doing a big push out of both making sure every student, not just every family, has a device and also has a Wi-Fi hotspot and/or signs up for the Comcast Internet Essentials, where we can pay for up to 6 months of service for a family.
Thank you, Jordan. If there are no other further questions, please signify by voting aye or nay in the chat, please. The aye votes are Martin Granum, Jackie Spross, Mark Watson, Yadira Martinez, Lisa Allen, Sheehan Kim, and myself. The motion carries. Okay. Let me look and see if Adam is on here yet. I don't see Adam on here. But I know that we have our situation page as well.
I can fill you in on the lot consolidation if you want me to go.
Okay, go ahead, Casey.
Are we ready? Okay. This is not uncommon, what we've seen over the last couple of years when we've gone through certain bond projects through this land use process. They've found that oftentimes our properties have been divided into several lot lines over the history of time. So this is the case for Newberry and Eastwood, and the city and the county is doing this as well. As we go through these land use process, just wants to clean up the lot lines since we're the sole property owner. So instead of having two distinctive lots for an elementary school, it's just to clean that up. So it makes it so it's one lot line. And that's the case here for Eastwood and Newberry. I know we did it at Glencoe, and we've done it at a few other schools in the last couple of years. So nothing out of the ordinary. It's just that process where we are on the land use.
Thank you, Casey. I'm looking for a motion.
I move that the Board of Directors approve the resolution for Newberry Elementary consolidation bargain and sale deed for lot consolidation for Newberry Elementary and the Wishart and Eastwood bargain and sale deed.
Second.
Okay, so it has been moved by Mark and seconded by Martin. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, board members.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, I didn't get there fast enough. Normally we would not be doing too many action items and voting on things in a work session like we are today. and this work session was sort of called for other reasons than these things, would it have been fine if we handled these in August and we're just doing it because we can? Why accelerate the timeline to address these today as opposed to in our August session?
Yeah, I can answer that. Is we're trying to wrap up those two projects. You know, we got the building permits and the land use. We accelerated the permit process. So now that we're in the process of getting ready to close those out, they wanted to get this lot consolidation down so we can close the project out. In theory, we could have waited until August, just where we don't have that regular board meeting in July, and that's when we wanted to close out the projects is the reason.
Thank you, Mark and Casey. Board members, if you don't have any additional questions, please signify by voting aye or nay in the chat. Okay, the aye votes are Yadira Martinez, Mark Watson, Lisa Allen, Sheehan Kim, Jackie Spross, Martin Granum, and myself. The motion carries. And we'll move on to our next item on our agenda. We have item E, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, core beliefs and values around law enforcement partnerships, with Mike and myself. Do you want to kick us off, Mike?
Yes, please. So as you know, this has been an ongoing conversation for the last several weeks. And I just want to say I appreciate the thoughtful process that the board is engaging in to learn as much as we can about our own interactions with school resource officers in the Hillsboro School District. I appreciate just the thoughtful nature that and the thorough nature that you're going through to reach an eventual decision. The discussion tonight is going to be a continuation of the one that we had a couple weeks ago. Because we were short on time during our last meeting, Alex did not get an opportunity to share the data that we've gathered around school resource officers for Hillsboro. So we wanted an opportunity to do that. We also wanted an opportunity to have some of our school administrators share some information in terms of their interactions with school resource officers, and in that information, talk a bit about how officers get engaged in a situation, what are some typical patterns of how they spend their time, and just some of the experiences that they've had. And so we thought it would be helpful to have four administrators here with us. You can see that Amy Torres is here with us. She's an assistant principal over at Liberty High School. She's the one waving at you. Berta Lule is the principal at Reedville Elementary. Prior to Reedville, she was at Lincoln Street as an assistant principal. So she's had experience not only at with the City of Hillsboro school resource officers, but also with Washington County school resource officers. I forgot to mention Amy has had experience at the high school and the middle school as well. The next person we have is OJ Gully. OJ is currently the principal at Evergreen Middle School. Prior to that, he was an assistant dean of students at Liberty High.
Hot water, I love.
Fran, you're not muted.
I think I'm.
And then finally, we've got Dave Vickery joining us, and he has had both middle school and high school experience as well. He was a dean of students over at South Meadows Middle School. He has been at Hill High and at Glencoe, and is currently the principal back at Hill High. So those four folks are also going to shed some light on typically the types of involvement that we have with our school resource officers. Following that conversation, we're also going to have a chance to hear from Dale. As I've shared with you in the past, we're in the process of gathering information from our community regarding their experience and their wishes for school resource officers as we move forward. And Dale is going to share with you basically the manner in which we are collecting that data and when we should have that information back and available to share with you. And then we also want to share some potential areas of improvement that we've been talking about as an administrative team, knowing that we're going to gather more information when these survey results come in. Obviously, throughout this, there's going to be questions, and we want to have plenty of time to answer those questions as well. So I will be quiet and pitch it over to Alex, he's going to kick us off with some data to share.
Before we start just with Alex, I think having just a format on how to ask questions for our school board members, I think that if you can just utilize the chat to kind of notify us that you have some questions. If you want the conversation to kind of keep going, or the information to keep going, but you want to just make a note of your question when there's a pausing moment, just type your question in there. And then once we get to that pause moment, we'll address those questions. All right, thank you. Thank you, Alex.
All righty. Hey, thanks again for having me. And we shall blast into statistics. So we've had the Hillsboro Police Department and the Washington County Sheriff's Office pull some statistics on their deputy and SROs. And before we dive into the statistics, I just want to reference for the Hillsboro SROs. They are technically a detective at the Hillsboro Police Department. So that makes this a little unique when we dive into this, because they basically carry a detective caseload where a patrol officer responds to a radio call, goes out for calls for service, writes up an initial report, and would fire that off. A detective potentially would pick that up and it would become a part of a detective's caseload. And so the numbers that we pulled for the SROs, I'm going to give you their caseload, but again, I just wanted to give you that reference that some of those cases occur outside of the school. They come into the SROs because they have a youth nexus to them. So as we get further into it, if we have questions, we can clarify that. So for the 8 SROs that we have servicing the schools within the city limits, we looked at a complete school year. So with the pandemic year, we threw that one out and we went back to the 18-19 full calendar year, school year, and they had 338 cases assigned to them. So that averages about 42 cases per SRO. Those cases can further be broken down into 151 of those cases have a child abuse, child neglect nexus. So those come from a variety of sources. They can come from a general call to dispatch on an abuse type situation or a neglect type situation. A patrol officer could go out if it's after school hours, investigate the complaint. But if the subject of that investigation turns out to be a juvenile, there's a nexus for that. That case could potentially be assigned to an SRO. So 151 of those cases are of that category. So that's a big chunk. 45% of their caseload is child abuse and neglect. I think a better stat, or a stat that shows what an SRO typically could do while they are on duty in their assigned schools, would be a call for service. So the SROs, when they come on duty and they log on to their computers, they begin tracking their day. And if there is a call for service, whether that is a dispatched call through our WACA dispatch center that happens to be at one of our schools, and they get dispatched to that call, the SRO will have that logged as a call for service. WACA, hey Jackie, WACA is our Washington County Consolidated Communications Center, and that is the dispatch center that dispatches first responders in Washington County. Sorry about that. Sorry about the acronym. So the SROs in their cluster would typically dispatch knows that if Lisa Erickson is working, she is assigned to these 6 schools. If there's a call for service in any one of those schools and Lisa Erickson happens to be working, she will get dispatched that call, and that'll be a call for service. So further breaking down that 338, I think the calls for service give us a little bit better glimpse of what they actually do day to day when they're on duty, potentially in our schools. And that breaks it down even further to 151 calls for service. So that, with that, in 2018, yes, at least one. Calls for service. Let me just double check that now that you mentioned that. Seems a little odd. That would be 151, right?
Right.
That's a good catch. It was, I'm sorry, 138. 138 would be calls for service.
Just a question, Alex. Also, you mentioned that that's one way that they get through WACA. What is the other way that they get called in for service?
So a call for service could be an SRO is out of school. They come across an incident. It could be a disturbance. It could be a information that comes from a student for an incident that happened over the weekend, but it's an incident where the SRO feels like there is there's enough to maybe start an investigation or look into it a little bit more than maybe a conversation. They'll create a call for service for that. So they'll find the best category that they can title that. Maybe it's again, an abuse complaint, or maybe it's a disturbance that happened over a weekend, something that happened at the skate park. But they will title that. They'll create a call. They'll pull a case, and that'll be a calls for service that wasn't dispatched. They could pull a traffic stop somewhere along the line, going from one school to another school, and that comes up as a call for service. So a lot of other ways a call for service can pop up, but that really shrinks it down to what they're doing for that day. The caseload just becomes a sort of that number is just really difficult. We try to maybe pin that down a little bit further, but without reading the narrative of those 338s, it's hard really to tell where that occurred, who reported that. It was just some legwork that if that becomes a statistic that we want to look at, that you guys want to look at further, we can do that with probably a little bit more time to have folks read those reports. Sheehan, that's correct. 138 will be for the calendar school year.
Alex, there was a question just if there was some data, like a presentation or something that you could share if you have it up. If not, that you could follow up and maybe share that with us.
Just a sheet on data.
That information broken down for us.
You bet. I'll forward that to you in whatever the appropriate manner is for this forum. I'll get that to you.
And the other thing was when you mentioned the calls of service, those are times where things are it triggers some document versus maybe sometimes you were mentioning, like if they just had a discussion or some other type of interaction, there wouldn't be that documentation, only for the calls of service. Is that correct?
That's spot on. There are a lot of conversations that an SRO could have, whether they're with staff members, administrators, students, throughout the day once they're logged on and they're at a school, at a property, where they come engaged in a conversation, and that conversation or that incident doesn't rise to a level of writing a report. There's maybe not a criminal nexus to it. That conversation won't be documented as we just don't have a way to track those at this point. Just the calls for service and the reports they write. But, you know, again, maybe that's, as we're having this conversation, you know, maybe that we look at that, is there a way to do that? When we look at the statistics, I think another standout one would be physical arrests. How many arrests are our SROs making in our schools where they take somebody into custody, fingerprint, transport them to another location? For the Hillsboro SROs in 1819, there were 2 physical arrests that happened. And we were able to go back. We went back one more year for that. And we looked at 1718 just to see if that was what that would look like. And in 1718, there were also 2 physical arrests. In 1819, both arrests were of Hispanic Latino students. In 1718, both arrests were Caucasian students. The 4 arrests, since they were so minimal, we looked into them and wanted to tell you that out of those 4 arrests, one was a student versus student menacing with a deadly weapon. It was a knife. One was a sex abuse one. One was a juvenile felony warrant, and one was a runaway reported from PPB. So pretty significant events that with 2 of those being really not, there's really no discretion to not make that arrest. Acronym, sorry. PPB would be Portland Police Bureau. Another piece that the SROs are involved in is the attendance and truancy process we have here in Hillsboro. Hillsboro is a little bit different in the sense that we use the SROs in that process and the attendance process, where other districts tend to use Northwest ESD. And so with that, from our district recording of numbers, the SROs in Hillsboro they had 518 referrals from our schools, again, that are within the city limits of Hillsboro. Out of those 518 referrals, 17 of those cases were assigned to SROs, meaning out of that 518, improvement was made in attendance where they didn't have to go a further step in the process. A school intervention worked, the attendance improved, maybe a mandatory meeting happened, and again, the attendance improved, where it didn't have to evolve to the last step of the truancy process where a citation was issued for the truancy. So out of 518, that's a pretty big number. So 17 cases, and that's not saying that all 17 of those were cited, the family cited, because that's not the case either. 17 just took a case number, which could mean that it just warranted a little bit more than a mandatory meeting. They went a little bit further with that. The sheriff's office reported we have 1 deputy working within the Hillsboro School District in our unincorporated schools. Yes, Yadira?
Well, I guess this is just a question, not just for you, but for anybody that can answer it. So why would, I guess I just don't see attendance being something that an SRO would need to deal with ever. I feel like this is something that should be done on the school level with us counselors, maybe like a social worker, something like that, because that just means that I feel like there's other problems within the family unit that I think would be better addressed by someone else. So I guess maybe that's a school district type thing that we need to look at, but I just feel like in issues over attendance, I'm not sure, that SROs, I guess I see it as an intimidation thing.
Right. And thank you, Udare, for that input and feedback. And absolutely, I think we should take the opportunity that we have to look into that. But I also want to throw out that, just so we know, the SRO piece of attendance comes after the school administration does their piece with the attendance. It takes a bit to get a referral to the SRO. So the school administrators have reached out, have done things, have made contacts, have attempted contacts with kiddos and maybe families, but it got to that point where they felt like, okay, maybe this is the next step in the process, and they made that referral. Right, wrong, or indifferent, but there has been a school piece prior to that. The SRO piece is not the only piece of that process.
Maybe it would be appropriate to have one of our school administrators talk about the process that they go through when it comes to attendance, just to shed a little bit of light on that.
Yes.
Anyone want to take that one? Amy, can you help us out with that one?
Yeah, I can help. So we have a weekly attendance meeting every week when we were in person and when we were not as well. And so we go through and we talk about kids that we need to connect with. And so I'm in charge of 9th grade. And then so we go through every list and we look at pluses and negatives of attendance. And then we talked about, have we called them? Have we met with them? Have we checked in with them? Have we done this? And given that you're considered chronically absent below 90%. So we look at that piece of it. And so this is after so this will probably take anywhere from like 4 to 8 weeks to get to the SRO. So at that point, we've met with the family, we've done different things, or maybe the family has not necessarily engaged with us. And so it's probably a 4 to 8 week period before it gets to that. And it's just a letter saying like, this is what it is, and this is what we need you to do. And with the SROs that I've worked with, they usually work with the families, like talk to the families. The parent then calls the SRO and is like, well, I can't get my kid out of bed. I don't know what to do. Can you come pick up my kid? And our SRO is really good about like, that's not what my job is to do. I don't want to intimidate your kid into school. So how can we work together to create a plan so that we're ensuring that we're following the rules and that we're getting all the kids that we need to do? But it's not like you're going to truancy right away. It's usually a 4 to 8 week process. It's about, between that time, there's been anywhere from like 3 to 10 phone calls and 2 to 5 meetings when we get to that place.
Just a question also to follow up on Mark's comment, and maybe if there's somebody that can answer this question about what's the, I guess, why we have this model versus other districts using the Northwest ESD, and what is it that they get through the ESD, or maybe we get through this model, that why we decided to go this route.
Yeah, I can answer Mark's question, because we at one time did use more of the ESD. Basically, what the ESD has is a truancy officer, what they call them, who has the ability to write tickets. So a lot of times it's a former law enforcement person. What we found and what our schools found is those folks don't know our schools very well. They don't know the families. And so it was really a push to have our SROs more involved, because they have a better background of working with our staff, how they understand how our schools run. They know the families. We found that the ESD had more of the truancy officer was more apt to write tickets for truancy violations. And we're a little bit different in Hillsboro. There's very few, if any, metro area SROs that are willing to assist schools with the truancy part. Ours happen to, so it's already part of the payment, I guess, that they're already on, that our schools and SROs, they do participate in those weekly attendance meetings almost all the time. They try to. I can't say they are at every one, but I know that they get filled in. So that's just a little bit background. I hope that answered your question, Mark, on the ESD part and the attendance meeting.
Thank you, Casey.
Can I just add one quick thing? We have a really comprehensive attendance manual that we train our teams on, and it's in line with the law around mandatory attendance. we have a very good structure for circling around and supporting our families, our care coordinators, our resource officers, our teams. We try every angle. It would be great to do a complete different presentation on attendance and the different ways that we reach out to our families in order to support them. We want to be with families. We don't want to cite them, but sometimes it gets to a point that we've tried everything and families are resistant, or they're not really willing to collaborate or work with us. So it's another approach that we can use to help collaborate and get families to understand how serious it is to have their students attend. And sometimes somebody different outside of our school system having a conversation with them helps them understand that we need to try different things to get their student to attend. So happy to do an entire different presentation on our attendance process if the board is interested.
I'd also add to, and we can probably gather this data, very few, if any, of even those letters actually result in a family going to truancy court. I mean, I can only think of maybe a handful, less than a handful a year that get to that point. And a lot of times the parent wants the student to be at the truancy court so they just need help. So it's a very minimal actually getting a family cited, let's say. I think that's the last resort.
Yeah, out of the 518, I want to say there were less than 10 that resulted in that. So very, very small amount.
Hi, yeah, I think this is a perfect time to talk about some of the interventions that our SROs have. I know when we think about police officers, it's usually someone that we call after the fact, or something's happened and we call them to come in, where our SROs are 100% opposite of that. With our SROs, it's really about interventions. And one of the pieces, yes, is the attendance piece, but it's also a care team, which is a group that has wraparound services. And they're part of that, where they bring another group of people to help. And we keep calling them SROs, but they're actually youth service, detectives, youth service, and they bring those services too. And that's why out of those 518, there's very few citing because of all the intervention pieces. They go to care team, they go to attendance team. They do a good job about being in our buildings for another adult for a student with, and we'll kind of go into that later as well. But they're a piece of the school, not another entity that we call in, which is quite different than some other school districts. And I think it's proof with some of those things that we see with the data that they really are making a difference before the end.
If I can chime in, if that's okay, for an example with attendance, having being formerly at Lincoln Street as the assistant principal there for 4 years, where our chronic attendance was the highest, I believe, in our elementary schools. And so just like Dave and everyone, Alex was saying, we try so many things, right? Adela, who I worked with 4 years, yes, part of the care team. And what was really nice with Adela is not only did she know my students at Lincoln Street, she knew the siblings at the middle school and at Glencoe High School. So if there's an issue, not only with the students that I had at the elementary level, it was the same issue we were having at the at Glencoe, right? So then we would call and, just doing home visits, one example I can think of, it was a 6th grade student, right? He needed to be in school, had so many, they were already at the truancy level when they had so high attendance problems. And his kinder little sister who had missed the 3rd by 2nd quarter. So when you do that home visit and, the last thing you want to do is like a ticket or a truancy. It's like, what can we do to help? And so after a month, when you see that progress, oh, you needed a ride or you needed this, and really educating some of our parents, because sometimes it's that defiance on the parent side saying, I'm not sending them. You need to send them. So that's just one example.
I'll jump in too. At the middle school level, in 4 years there, I can think of, one situation where it actually ended up in a citation. where it actually went to court in a citation out of numerous amounts of times. But most of the time, it ends up with the family begging to meet with the SRO because they don't know what to do next. And it leads to that partnership. And 9 times out of 10, our SRO what happens is a lot of times the parents will leave for work early, and the kid will end up staying home because the parents are not there. So our SRO, like I was saying, 9 times out of 10, will set up a situation where they pick that student up and bring them to school. I see that more times than not. So like Dave was saying, it's more of like that intervention piece, that proactive piece that we're trying to keep kids in school, not a punishment. Like I said, one time that I can remember, and that was kind of like parent neglect. But other than that, it's a true partnership between us, SRO, and parent. So.
Thank you, everyone. Let's go back to Alex if we want and move on to the next kind of data that you had or other topics that you wanted to bring up. You're muted, Alex.
Thank you for not letting me go 2 minutes muted. Hey, just real quick to close the loop. So the sheriff's office with the 1 deputy, 3 arrests for that school year. 3 of those, 1 occurred on a school property. It was an adult who was arrested over at Indian Hills Elementary who had been trespassed off the property previously. The other 2 were also adult arrests that occurred off school properties, most likely as a patrol assist, not as in his SRO function. Our county SRO had 71 referrals for attendance truancy during the school year for his 9 schools. And that's really the statistics. I mean, I could give you some categories of, some examples of maybe types of calls, but I don't know if we really, if that's of interest or not. What
we have a question in there, and I did want to just follow up because I think on our last conversation that we had on this, one of the things that I was asking about if there was research done either by the National Association of the SROs or anywhere else that has kind of more research and data that shows what the impact is of having them in schools versus not. What is what is there a benefit in, and how are you measuring that? I think that's really important as we look to make our decision is what are we actually looking at in the data, not just in our school, but that shows like, yes, does this minimize criminal activities? Does this create better attendance? Does this program, keep our kids challenged academically? So I guess I'm looking to see if that association has any information like that. And then before we continue, Jordan, maybe if you can let Jackie in the meeting, please. I think she accidentally got out. She might be waiting. And then we have a question from Maya.
Hi, I just had a question. So with making schools feel like a safe space for all students, how are students that don't feel safe around officers, and especially officers in uniform, being accommodated?
Yeah, that's a great question, Maya. Sort of along those lines, I will say that the SRO program is a program that has changed its day-to-day procedures throughout the years that I've seen the program. The program hasn't been so entrenched where needs or daily protocols had to stay a certain way. When I was a SRO back in 1999, it was a little bit different. The school safety scene was a little bit different, and I looked like a much different police officer than maybe we would see today walking around in our schools, right? And I think the national trend back in 1999 was more of educational piece. We were teaching DARE programs. We were in the schools. But unfortunately, Maya, we live in a time school safety has responded or shifted towards, a national trend of there's been active shooter scenarios that have occurred, and we've morphed to a little bit more of a target hardening. And I think we see the effects of, how does that affect how a police officer looks every day in a school? And I think that those are the type of conversations, Maya, that now is the perfect opportunity for us to explore. So I think moving forward, we look at that and we see how does that look. I think Dale is going to have some great information after the survey comes back, and I think we will be able to, if we feel like the piece of school safety still includes that, then I think that's a conversation that we have. So that's a great question. We could go with hard uniforms. We call them soft uniforms, Maya, where they don't wear the outer vests or the leg holsters. A lot of those things were taken into consideration when we have police officers in our schools. We're carrying long guns, rifle-looking guns, and those are strategies that we can definitely have a conversation with our local law enforcement and accommodate our students and staff to the best that we can. So I appreciate you asking that.
Maya, your question is really at the heart of why we're having this discussion, is to make sure that we are making sure that students feel comfortable as well as safe, and taking a hard look at our program and our existing protocols, procedures, and relationships. And if those need to be morphed into something different, then we're certainly ready to do that. One of the things that one of the reasons that we invited our school administrative team here tonight is to have them give just some, their perspective on how SROs spend their time. We've heard a lot about relationship building. We've heard about abuse investigations, involvement with DHS. We've heard about truancy, and we've heard about the consultation that they do and the education piece that they do. We all know that those are components together with that safety aspect that SROs provide in a school setting, but would want to give the opportunity to our school administrators just to share how they work with SROs and how they see them using their time and the kind of things they call them in for. And we, Erica, will get you any data that we can from that, from national, I know there's a fancier name for it, but let's call it the National School Resource Officer Association. I don't even know. Okay, there we go. We will get that research for you. But we also wanted you to have a firsthand look of what it really looks like in Hillsboro. So if we could have one of our school administrators kick off and just talk about your experience with SROs, that would be helpful.
Well, I guess I'll go. So I've had the opportunity to work in 2 buildings with 2 SROs, but then also multiple SROs from other buildings. And the one piece that I've found the SROs that I've been with is their ability to be mentors. And I think a good example of that is if you guys know Victor Castro, I think he's probably been a mentor to the OICP program for about 100 years straight. Every time he has a mentor that graduates, it seems like there's about 10 kids knocking on his door to do it again. And he keeps in touch with them and helps them through those. And that's just from that organization. And then, we have Stephanie, who's a great resource, especially for the girls in our school that come to her and talk to her about other situations. And when they walk around at lunch or whatever, and they're in their building, you can see the crowd of kids that kind of come around them and talk to them about, their day and what's going on. And just the fact that they really bring them under their wing and help them out at so many different levels, whether it's school things, whether it's home life, whether, it's dating advice. I mean, it's just so much that the kids get mentored on from somebody else in our school.
I can piggyback on that. The mentoring piece, even at the middle school level, we use our SRO for one-to-one mentoring with students that maybe our counselors aren't connecting with, maybe our administration isn't connecting with, maybe with that SRO in a different perspective. I can't tell you numerous times where we've connected a student to our SRO and it turned out to be a great relationship. We've had, I can remember a specific student that is, middle school on drugs, right? Just consistently doing drugs. And the one avenue we had, we tried everything, and then we partnered in with our SRO, and it was a success story. So we do that a lot, but on the day-to-day, it's all relationship building. It's mentoring, relationship building, being visible, supervision, things like that is what we are consistently using our SROs for. And like Vic said, it's not just the one. When ours is out, they all come running if we need something. So that's just, it's huge to be able to do that and have them, when we need them.
So I've gotten a couple questions on here, and I think let's go with Sheehan and then Yom.
Yeah, thank you. My question was actually referring to one of the data points that Alex, you had shared at the very beginning of the presentation, when you said that 151 cases involved child abuse and neglect, which that constitutes about 45% of the cases that SROs respond to. And my question is kind of two-part. One, are those calls taking place during school hours or even at school, or is it happening mostly at home? And two, how are we capturing, I guess, which calls come through the SRO line versus which calls get connected through, let's say, DHS or something like that, especially when it pertains to a child abuse or a neglect skin?
Yeah, without diving deeper into the statistics, we, again, unfortunately, would have to basically read the narrative of that report to find out if it was a DHS report or if it was a building staff member who called and initiated that report, or if it was the SRO themselves who made that report. It's hard to distinguish that. That number I gave you was just the total number that was assigned to the SROs. We would have to further break that down. And again, I think we can do that. But I thought that was just such an important piece to what they do, in knowing what a difficult situation a DHS incident can be. It's difficult for the kiddo who potentially is involved with times a family member, for our staff members to navigate a DHS complaint as well. So our SROs who are in the schools, they're detectives. They get specialized training. That's one of the benefits of being a detective, is a child abuse detective gets specialized training for child abuse. A major crimes detective gets training for that. Our SROs get additional training, and we follow multidisciplinary protocols for the county for child abuse that the SROs help us maintain, making sure that we don't re-traumatize victims of child abuse. DHS is just such a sensitive type of call, a child abuse call, that the relationships our SROs have with our staff, typically, DHS also has, same members working in geographical areas. So the SROs and our staff members get to know our DHS workers, and that information flow just becomes easier. The kiddos who maybe can't be reached at home after school, and maybe in abuse situations that happening at home, it's just becomes a better practice for our victims to be involved at school, away from potential perpetrators, and to make that process go easier. I think is a very important part of what an SRO does for us. So thank you.
We have another question from Ilham and then Devlin.
Yeah, so my question was, how do SROs build relationships with students, especially like with students who are uncomfortable with police officers and ones that don't want to have a mentor or be helped?
We have one of our school folks answer that, just what you see on a daily basis, how that occurs.
Yeah, I think a lot of that happens in the earlier grades, and I think once we get to a situation where they don't feel comfortable, it's going to take a little bit more. But all of our SROs do a lot of things in the summer camps and some other things that to build relationships with kids at a younger age. So as they go through our schools, that they have ability to keep those relationships. And the other piece is that they're just part of what we do. I can think of multiple times when SROs have been a part of lip syncs or flash mobs, or they are more human, right? They're not seen as a police officer in our buildings. They're seen as a member of our staff. They're seen as a human being. We had a situation where we have a pumpkin carving tradition here that we started a few years ago, and our SRO brings her family with her little child, and the kids, and she's running around. So just being more human and not being that person and that's got the vest and the gun. And I think that's one major way that I see it in my building.
I'll go next. Again, coming from the elementary level, right? Again, I was 4 years as the assistant principal at Lincoln Street, and this year I have our one deputy at Reedville. And so I think of Adela working with her for 4 years. I mean, she really knows our community, right? It's that trust that if you talk about a certain place, you know where it's at. I know she was really upset, and I was too, when the police precinct got moved, right? It was downtown, what was it, by 10th, right? Really close to a lot of her communities, and it got moved way out to Cornell, right? And so when you ride with our SROs, when you do a home visit, I mean, it's huge. I mean, she would come in and do kinder, right? We're talking about community helpers in our community, and she's one of our community service people. So she'd bring her patrol car. So at that early age at kindergarten, when they're learning about community service people, they see Adela, right? As a woman, as a person of color. And so you build those relationships too, because I have to tell you the truth, SROs compared to police officers. I mean, I can tell you many stories as a person of color. It's different when it's a police officer compared to our SROs. And I see a little difference too right now being at Reedville when Nathan, our deputy, is not available and he has to call backup and it's a police officer. It's very different because our SROs really know our students, they know the community. Again, it's that alignment too, that they really speak up. Sometimes their voices for our families, especially our families that have fear of law enforcement, right? They voice for them. So if something comes up, whether it's truancy or, student to student, especially at the older grades, that they're going to speak on behalf of our family. So it doesn't end up to be a ticket or to go in jail, especially as they get older, right? And so I think that really, I was talking to my own sons. One's a sophomore going into college and one's going to be a senior. And I was asking, what do you think of our SROs? So I think that student voice that we continually to have, like this year at Reedville, I invited Nate, introduced him to our staff. You introduce them again so that they see it's a positive image, because again, they're, I wish I had more positive relationships or experiences as a student, because I am a student product of Hillsboro School District since 3rd grade here. And so, I know there's many more things we need to continue doing, but I think again, when they're the voices and they really know, it's that relationship, like we're all saying, if they know our students and families, where they're coming from, we advocate for them too. So that's just a little bit of what I wanted to say with my experience with the 2 schools I've been.
Another quick note, RSR building relationships, he sent, prior to when he got sick in December, he was recording weekly videos and sending them out to our students. We'd use an advisor every Monday morning. We'd watch the video. Students loved it. They looked forward to it. It was related to our kids, what we were seeing in school, what we were seeing in the community, fun. It was all about culture and climate. Those videos also went to families. We got great feedback on that. So that's just more so being visible, building relationships, but also at the middle school level, our students go into health for 4 weeks. And our SRO, he would push in and teach a quick unit on, regarding health, social, emotional, what we're seeing in the community, what students should expect, what they need to look out for. All of those things. It's not like just ways to be visible, build relationships with students. And he would be honest, there's no question you can't ask me. You ask me anything, school appropriate, of course, but you ask me and I'm going to do my best to answer it for you because let's face it, middle school and all ages, they're curious. So I just think being visible the way that he is, it goes such a long way as far as culture and climate and proactive work. So.
Thank you, OJ. Devlin, you had a question?
Yes. So what I wanted to ask is, so from what I'm getting, it sounds like that there's a lot of effort put into essentially building relationships, especially in those elementary and middle school years when it comes to school resource officers. I just wanted to ask, how does that sort of change over time? So because I understand that there's probably going to be differences in attempts to build relationships in elementary versus middle versus high school. I just want to know, how does that change as students get older?
I think it's just more of a presence as they get older. I'm just sitting here thinking about Detective Slade, who is the resource officer over at Liberty, and how he would come over during lunch every day because he really liked the bento here at Hill High. And the kids started noticing that Slade showed up every day during bento time. And so it became like a thing. So the kids would see him and they would talk to him, and he wasn't even our SRO. And I think so. That's a perfect example of at the high school, it's less about rockets, what they do in the summer and those things. And it's more about just, hey, bud, I saw you, in the band. I saw you at the football game. I saw you here. What's going on? How's that class going? It's more of that kind of building relationship. What are you going to do after high school? Are you on track? Those type of things is how they build relationships, or what I've seen, especially at the high school level.
Thanks, Dave, for picking that up. I kind of want to shift our conversation a little bit for the administrators to ask them in regards to discipline, when do you call them in? I think it was at one of our sessions that we had maybe a month ago with our previous student rep, Maria, who I want to honor her voice and her comments that she made, that sometimes what she saw is when kids of color would be called in for discipline, automatically there would be an SRO in the room, and she wouldn't see the same thing. So and to the point of Alex's, the documenting process, those kind of interactions I would assume wouldn't get that call for service, but there are touch points. So kind of to the administrators, when do you decide to call in, and why would they be in the room for any kind of interaction with students around discipline?
Amy, would you mind taking that one? I know that over the years you've developed a pretty, it's pretty straight in your mind what you want SROs involved with and what you want to handle on your own. Could you take that one and kick that one off?
Yeah, ultimately as an administrator, I have the decision making of when I want to involve an SRO. I always consult with an SRO before I talk to a kid if it's an issue involving drugs or a weapon or something. I always consult with him so he can give me his side and his thought about it, and just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And then at that point, I usually don't involve the SRO in a lot of disciplinary things, because I just need to know the law side. Because what I have found is I make, as an administrator, I make the decision to involve them. If it's my job as an administrator to say, no, this is a school issue, we're going to deal with this school issue. So I've been able to develop that relationship with different SROs. not all my SRO experiences have been positive. I can say that. And I think one of the things is like, I'm in charge, and I, as an administrator, need to know when I need to involve the police and when I do not need to involve that. And I think what it happens is when it is an issue of drugs, and it's after lot of issues with drugs. It's not like the first time they come in. It's not the second time. Like for me, it's usually like the third time, and they're not following through on what they need to do. And I think that's one of the things where I involve them. Sometimes if there's a safety concern, I involve our school resource officer, but it's not, they're just there, and I give them the heads up, and they're like, just call me if you need me. And when I need him, then I call him, and it's usually not the case. And ultimately, SROs can be involved even if we don't want them. Like if there's a fight, if there's an assault, and the victim decides to press charges, I can't tell the victim you can't press charges. So if the student is the victim and they decide to press charges, then it does go through their SROs. So that's time where, for me as a person of color, it gets very difficult to be like, well, they're pressing charges, and I would rather you talk to our school resource officer than somebody else that I don't know what you're going to get, because I know what you're going to get with our SROs here in Hillsboro. So ultimately, I, as the administrator, have the decision to involve them in ours, which is how we said earlier, it's like the last thing we want to do. It's like the ultimate last thing. And it's after several interventions that we've tried with specific students going that way. But I decide when and if the SRO is involved, if it's a school issue. But if it's an assault issue, that is kind of has to go through the parents, and just not parents, but the student deciding that they want to press charges. And I also involve them in if there's a threat of some kind, I usually involve them because I want to make sure that I have everything checked out, and that if it's a threat, if it's, and he does a really good job of like walking us through the process and making sure that we realize and that we're following all the protocol. Last year I did have we had a significant case where we had to go to a level 2, and they're involved in all that. But I think ultimately they have the law side, and when it comes to it, and they're more specific about like pulling out their law book and like giving me this and telling me that necessarily I don't know from the top of my heart like they do. But I think it's important that we use them. I use them as a resource.
Thank you, Amy. I think it was a really good point that you made about being a person of color and also being in an administrative role. And to that effect, I mean, we have seen our leadership change at HSD and having more people of color in our administrator's role. And kind of to the point that you made about how that has fluctuated, that decision whether to involve them or not is really based on administrator to administrator. And a lot of the data that we see in our own district that is very disparate between our students of color and not, and when that decision is made is kind of where we call into question when we involve a lot of our SROs. So I don't know if David or OJ, you have any additional thoughts around that. And then after you're done, I'm gonna call on Jackie for a question.
Yeah, I can go with that. I think that Amy hit the nail on the head there with getting our SROs involved. It's not something that we tend to do very often, unless it's a breaking the law situation and talking about the threat assessments. And once again, an SRO is part of a team of that too. Like that's not just all on them. That level 2 is also another team with multiple HSD folks on it. One of the things that I really appreciate about our SROs is that when it comes to their abilities in the law, they kind of can live in a gray area where a patrol officer comes in and they are, I'm doing this is the law, bang, bang, bang. Where our SROs have the ability to say, I'm not going to get involved right now because I think the school's got it handled, and, be able to make those decisions about not putting our kids on paper, or knowing the family situation and some of the documentation of our families, and knowing that if they do put something on paper, how that jeopardizes every family member. And so they don't. So sometimes when we're talking about data, I kind of think that it's hard to, not having some data is good, because it means our kids were able to not be on paper. And that's every SRO I've ever had always starts it with, I don't want to put the kid on paper. I don't want that. Like, we need to find resources. And I've had every opportunity to say, I don't need you. I don't want you a part of this. Almost every time, unless it's very severe, that's been taken.
And I can't think of, I know it's never happened with me, any time where an SRO has tried to overstep us, overstep me for sure, where, you know, I can say, nope, you're not in this one. And they're saying, okay, no big deal. You know, like Amy said, call me if you need me. They never try to go above us, what I've seen. I'll also include the part, we've had a couple of serious incidents, you know, where there's, you know, serious weapon, threat of a gun, things like that. That stuff happens, right? We've had that. And it's the principal's decision ultimately to recommend for expulsion and go that route if we get to that point. But I use, and I'm sure Amy and Vic and Berta do the same thing, we use our SROs as thought partners when it comes, we always have to put a safety plan. We always treat them as if they're going to come back to school. So we put a safety plan in always and have that SRO as a thought partner in that. The SRO is never in a position where they're saying, oh, that kid needs to be expelled. You need to do this. They don't do that. They know that we are treating them like they are a student. They're going to be a student. So we put plans in place. And then once we have that plan in place, if we need to expel, the SROs are out of that situation. They're not included in that expulsion situation. So we separate that for sure, but we definitely use them as thought partners throughout that process in serious situations. So.
Thank you, Audrey. Jackie, did you want to add more? Did that answer your question with what Amy mentioned earlier?
I think it pretty much answered my question. That I know it can be a fine line, but it sounds like our administrators and our SROs work well together and make sure that that line is still kind of stays separate. So thank you.
Okay, sounds good. I had a couple questions about Alex. Go ahead.
Can I just add one more thing to that? The SROs have historically all been very well versed on just the sheer presence of a police officer and what that presence entails legally. So sitting in a room with a kiddo on a school disciplinary matter is not the role of an SRO. They've really, really, really tried to have a clear delineation on that when I'm sitting with the kid is one thing, but when I'm sitting with the kid with the uniform, a badge, and a gun, that's a different thing. So I think I will echo what the administrators have said. I've seen everybody seems to have a very good idea of their lanes when it comes to discipline and crime. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Back to a question to you. I think, well, one, I think Berta and somebody else mentioned Pedro Castro and Adela and how important it is to have someone that's bilingual and bicultural and ensuring those relationships. And I think that's one thing that we've talked about as a board is that we don't really get to have a lot of say in who gets assigned to us and who gets to build those relationships and be in our spaces. So maybe talking a little bit, Alex, about how somebody gets put into the program. The other thing for you to address, Alex, is there's this, and I think I hear it even in our own people of color that we have in this space, is a lot of the interactions that we have had historically with police have been very traumatizing or have been, there's been a lot of hurt. And so the positive work that is done during this space in the SRO relationships and mentorship, if that isn't found outside when we call somebody that's regular, do you know of how that communication is from the SRO program to police at large to kind of have something similar? Because I mean, and I mentioned this in another meeting that I have, and Pat Garrett was there where he mentioned the statistics that the majority of white people in our community feel very safe with police, but that's not the same statistics for people of color. And the way that our internal culture is in law enforcement, is there any communication that says we're doing this work and how does it reflect outside into our community as well? Or that might be a question also, Mike, for when we talk to our partner agencies. But I wanted to make sure that I put it out there for Alex in case he knows because he used to work there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Erica. I mean, I think that, you know, what you're alluding, what you're stating is, you know, how are our law enforcement agencies here in Hillsboro coming to a fair and bias-free policing strategies, and what are they doing, and how does that bleed from the schools to the streets? And I think our law enforcement agencies here have worked very hard on explicit and internal biases. They've trained to that. Our SROs here in Hillsboro are a little bit unique in the sense that I don't know if folks know that a lot of school districts and a lot of SROs are temporary SROs per se. They are SROs when school's in session, but our SROs here in Hillsboro, they are part of, I think one of the administrators have said it, they're part of our youth services unit. And when school's not in session, our SROs still get to be assigned to youth services. So they're working with our kids throughout the year. When they're on break, they know that our kids and families still may need resources and need visits, and they do home visits. There's a program where SROs work with administrators on breaks and they do home visits. They run summer camps throughout the summer. So I think that there is a concerted effort here in Hillsboro to get the word out and to try to, we've been very, very fortunate that community policing strategies are accepted here in Hillsboro. And I think, again, the SRO program showing that it has been able to shift gears over time shows that they want to be engaged in that process, and they're willing to be engaged in that process. And I think that it shows that the police leadership is sending out strong messages. I know that they're working on recruitment and hiring. And I think that I've heard great pieces in the last board meetings leading up to this about how we can improve supervision and accountability, training. I think measurement and assessments need to be explored. And I think that the key piece in fair and bias-free policing is community outreach, which I think we are doing right now, and we're getting input. So I think we're on our way, Erica, with that. But there is still obviously work to be done with that.
And can you, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure you captured the how they're selected to serve on as an SRO.
Sorry. So the SRO process basically is an assignment. The sheriff's office and HPD, they have to reach a benchmark in years of service. They have to typically be off probation. They can't be a probationary officer or deputy. Typically, there's a process that the officers put in for the assignment. They look at their work history. They try to find the best fit, but they can't force people to put in for assignments. Typically, they, the assignment opens. They get a handful of folks who put in for it. And then the department looks again at a lot of things leading up to that selection. And then they also have historically looked to community partners to be involved in that process. So I know the school district has sat on many, many panels for the oral interviews for the SRO. So they typically sit through an oral panel with community youth partners. They do presentations that are related because they know that SROs have to be comfortable in speaking and teaching. They try to zero down that right personality fit for that position. But again, it's not a position that the agencies can pick and just say, hey, Jackie, you're an SRO because we think you're a good fit. That person has to put in and go through the process.
Mike, you wanted to add something?
Fran had made a point. I wanted to give her a minute to speak. Then I wanted to talk about just some feedback I received from our clinical psychologist for the district. But I wanted to give Fran an opportunity to share a little bit, something that she shared in a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and regarding, and just to give Fran a heads up so she knows what I'm talking about. It had to do with how we get the demographics of a police department to actually change.
Hi, everybody. You know, I don't think everybody in this board knows, but my dad was a cop and my mom worked for LAPD for nearly 40 years. So I have a long history of being raised with a law enforcement family, as well as having them be a part of my everyday life. So I understand the perspective of law enforcement. That being said, as a person of color, and this was shared with me in an affinity group, and I'm sure she'd be fine for me to share it, but with one of our other administrators of color, that if we don't start putting our people of color out in front of our kids as positive role models, the trajectory and the scenario and the narrative that we're writing is never going to change. And so any opportunity that we can with our SROs to put people who represent and look like us in front of them in a positive role model manner allows us the opportunity to change that scenario, because nothing's going to change if it stays the same, right? I know from my own experience, when I leave this position and when I'm not here, how I'm treated by the world is different. And so had I had somebody who looked like me, who was in front of me and was able to support and be a model for me, my trajectory, my narrative may have been different. And so I just wanted to share that. Go ahead, Mike, sorry.
Thank you, Fran. Alex, do you know what our current makeup is of our SROs of officers of color versus non?
We have, between Hillsboro and county, we have 8 Caucasian, 1 Hispanic, Latino.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
And Erica, that's one of the conversations that, as I've talked to Sheriff Garrett or to Chief Coleman, they're very interested in involving us in a greater capacity on the selection of school resource officers. They too are trying to diversify their workforce, and they understand the power that school involvement can have in that process. So I just want you to know that they're very interested in partnering with us in that.
Thanks, Mike. We have a question from Sheehan and then a comment from Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the administrators. This is a question for you all. I've really appreciated your guys's feedback when it comes to SROs in the buildings and, you know, mainly focusing on relationship building, mentorship, and supervision. I would love to hear of any challenges that you guys have faced with working with SROs, and maybe even a better way to put that question is, you know, what are the areas for improvement? You know, if we're all here right now to see how we can improve the partnership with SROs if we were to continue. And so I would love to hear maybe some ground level perspective of what are some changes that you would want to see in the partnership that we have with SROs to better serve our students.
I'll piggyback from what Fran was saying. I think one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, you know, Fran, you mentioned it. I think we need to, you know, depending, right? I've been in title schools, right? That's been my experience with, you know, being an educator. But I think we need to really create, it's like teaching, right? I'm in the teaching world. We try to create our own teachers in our district. I think that we need to do the same thing with, you know, our SROs or just like any of our fields. We need to create our own. So creating that mentorship, that students, no matter who I am, that I can see myself becoming an SRO, becoming a police officer. So I think that mentorship, that I think it's the beginning of many more things. And, you know, I think we've been saying this too, to diversify, right? Because a title school is going to be different from a non-title school, but it's just a community overall in our district. So for me, I think that's one thing I know, and I shared with our group when we met a couple of weeks ago, that mentorship, just like, you know, and it begins at the early age, right? From kinder, because we know what happens by the time to middle school and high school. Sometimes it's a little too late. they need to be knowing right now, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think I said it before, we all have different experiences, right? I mean, not just SROs, but just law enforcement police officers. And so we all come from different experiences, but how can we advocate for our students in our community and our schools that, you know, whatever experience that they have, it doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for that SRO, that police officer, you know? And so I think that mentorship that we can create for our students will really benefit our community.
Thank you, Bertha.
I think one of the improvements that can be made, I think Alex or Mike spoke about it, is like as an administrator, we have the agreement, but really what does that look to day? Like what can I expect my SRO to do? What should I expect him like at this part of the day, kind of a thing. And I think that's also, you know, being clear on both sides. Like I know we have a meeting with our SRO every beginning of the year just to check in. We have a weekly meeting, but I don't think that's necessarily expected or done across the state or whatever. So I think just having that clear feedback and roles and responsibilities as we do to make sure that we know what they're supposed to do, and that we're talking and that we're communicating, and just ensuring that we're able to have those tough conversations also with our SROs that not necessarily have a lot of equity training. They do implicit and bias, but I just think sometimes like I have a great relationship with our SRO and I can call it out, but I don't know if I would have done that 4 years ago when I was like newer in my career. But now I can say like that's not what we do. This, you need to look at this. How does this impact this? But I think it's also, that's the part that we really need to be able to look at, is like what are the roles and responsibilities, so that that as an SRO, as an administrator in whatever feeder in my area, it's the same experience and that kids have that same experience.
I agree with that. Over the 2 schools that I've been at, I've had 3 different SROs and all different. And I think somehow if we could, I don't know, get on the same page with consistency. My SRO, the one I have now, I got 2 years ago, and it was the best thing ever because I was able to sit down with him and let him know the expectations, what we're about, you know, not just me, the school, but the district. That was huge, and it showed. But I think coming into a school with an SRO that's already established and had a mentality and that's just tough. So somehow, I don't know the answer to it, but somehow if we can get on the same pace, some consistency within our SROs from school to school, maybe they meet with administrator. I don't know. I know I meet with mine consistently weekly, but if we can all do it together so there's a common message, I think that's huge. Some are more visible than others, right? I've experienced that. So if we can lay down some common expectations around, you know, if you're in the building, this is where you should be, when you should be, and things like that. I think that will sure up a lot in itself right there. So.
I think,
Dave, did you want?
yeah, just a real quick, you know, talking about some of the maybe the things that, not a problem, but something with an SRO, especially early on in my admin career. I wasn't clear on what was SRO and what was administrator. And luckily I had an SRO that was really, really great. And sometimes I'd be like, hey, I need to get you involved. And he'd be like, no, you don't. You know, so I think where we do need to do trainings and some on the same page as our SROs, some of our brand new administrators should probably do the same thing with the SROs, so that they don't make the same mistakes I did. We're trying to get them involved where they shouldn't be involved, and so, or putting them in a situation that they shouldn't be in because of my lack of experience.
All right, if maybe this is a good opportunity to transition to the rest of our conversation. You know, and I will share. I was going to share with you, but we kind of moved beyond that. I want to share with you just the thoughts of Dr. Will Hinson, who's our clinical psychologist, and I'll share that with you in an email. But I also wanted to transition us a little bit towards the information that we're gathering from our community. and give Dale an opportunity to talk about that, the type of information that we're gathering, the methodology that we're using. But before we do that, I see Yadira does have a question.
Yeah, there's a couple questions, Mike. So before we move on to that, I just want to make sure that we're good on time, and if we go over a little bit, it's okay. So we have Devlin, Mark, Yadira, and then Jackie.
Sorry. Okay. Do you want me to talk or?
Yeah, go ahead if you have a question.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask is, why do we have SROs doing stuff like okay, I don't really know how to ask this, but why SROs and not counselors when it comes to interacting with kids and stuff like that? Like talking about more casual things, because I think one of them was talking about, or I think Alexander was talking about dating advice or something like that. I'm just wondering, why would we have SROs do those things instead of professionally trained counselors?
I think the example that Dave was giving is that it's not that we assign an officer to talk about dating advice. It's that students form a relationship with an officer sometimes, and they will maybe share concerns that they have and that kind of thing. It's not that they are assigned to do that. It's that relationship develops, and it becomes a place. It becomes a trusted adult that they interact with.
Thank you, Devlin. Mike, Mark.
It sounds like, and I don't want to. I wanted to make sure I give you guys a chance to answer this in your own voice, because I don't want to mischaracterize what it sounds like you're saying. In response to Sheehan's question about changes and whatnot, it seems to me like you would all sort of suggest incremental changes and not a revolutionary upheaval. And if that's the case, I just want to make sure that that's the message you're trying to put across, and I'm not just misunderstanding what you're saying. So are the suggestions you would have regarding the SRO program, yes, there are changes that need to be made, but they're incremental changes, we're on the right path, or are we missing out that we really should be talking about revolutionary upheaval?
I'll go first on that. I say yes, in my opinion, incremental change. I think we're on the right path, but we need to tweak some things. We need to get on the same page from things. And that's coming from a person that outside of our SRO, if I'm on the street and I get pulled over or something, I legitimately am afraid, right? I do some things out of the normal, put my hands up and things like that. But I have seen over the years the positive work that the SROs have done. I've seen kids change and kids' success stories to where I feel that truly SROs we need to keep them. And that's just my opinion. But yes, we need to tweak. But I think even at the middle school level, if they are gone, if we don't have them, it's a detriment, not only to our school, but to our kids and their successes, in my opinion.
I would say the same thing is that I think we need to periodically examine all our systems, and especially when we work with the most valuable our kids, that we need to examine and tweak all of our systems. And I think this is a perfect example of that we can examine and making it better for our staff, our communities, and especially our kids. And I do think we're on the right track. I've seen so many positives come out of SROs, and I would want us not to lose them, and to keep going and just make it a better place and better system for everyone.
Amy or Bernie, do you have anything you want to add? Because I have a follow-up as well. So, okay.
As be a safety person for the district, also, I would like to. And having the pleasure of sitting in both seats, I think that when we talk district safety and how we get to the end goal of that, there's so many layers, and the layers are important. We cannot do safety solely with one technique or one resource. And I think the SRO are an integral part of safety and in many different facets. But I also think that some incremental changes would benefit both parties, but I think that they are a benefit for our district safety.
So my follow up, I don't want to make you, the four of you, feel too uncomfortable, but your boss brought you here to talk to us. So yeah, shake your head, Mike. So I mean, we got 36 buildings, I think. The vice principals, we got maybe 60 of them or so. We got 4 here. Do you guys think you're an accurate representation, like just your opinion? Do you think your colleagues sort of share this perspective, or if we mined a little deeper, would we find alternative perspectives?
I can speak for the high school for sure. And I would say that my colleagues would share similar ideas that I have, even with the tweaking, right? And
yeah, I'm reluctant to have you speak for your colleagues too much. I'm just sort of trying to get a tenor of things. We have 4. How many? So Mike, maybe Dale. How many principals, vice principals do we have overall in the district? 60-ish.
Yeah, that's a good guess. Yes.
Yeah, right. So I mean, we have 4 here, and they all seem on the same page. They all seem pretty supportive of the SRO program in general. I'm wondering, much to some of our points earlier, I believe there are probably members of our community who would be uncomfortable speaking out in this platform or speaking out in general negatively regarding any police because they would fear repercussions. So if those dissenting voices are out there, I would love to figure out how we hear those as well.
And one way, I was going to say, one way that was brought up earlier is that there is an affinity group, even with the within our our teachers union. So I was going to make sure that we pointed that out. There's a way of getting those voices in the room in a way that protected our administrators and also people that might have different opinions but are afraid to do so. I think it's important to look at this from all the angles, especially the voices that we don't historically see in these spaces, because there is fear around this topic. So more to come. I'm sure that Dale will share, and Mike, around that. So I want to make sure that we give a chance to everybody that has asked a question. So Yadira, you're next, and then Jackie, you're on deck.
I just, from my own experience, right? It's really different from what I'm hearing. So my lived experience is not meshing up to what I'm hearing. So I feel like there's definitely improvements. I definitely think that there has to be some type of oversight. There has to be a way for our parents that have these interactions that are not documented to be able to express how they feel after an encounter like that, which is what we're missing. So the other thing too is I mean, as a parent, like at what point does the school share information with the resource officer as far as like, what's my phone number, where do I live, or is that just something that can happen without like giving permission to share it? But I mean, just all of that information. So, but really just some sort of accountability, some sort of way so that we know that our parents can express their feelings about those types of interactions. Because as far as I know right now, we don't have a system in place where a parent might get a call from an SRO that they can say, like, you know what, I don't really know why this SRO was calling me, and I don't understand why it was handled in this manner. So just making sure that there is some oversight, some accountability, I feel is like something that can be greatly improved.
Thank you, Adira. Jackie?
I actually, you don't have to ask my question. I did want to know the affinity voices, or is that what you called them? I'm sorry.
Oh, I see that. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So that's my question kind of is,
Yeah, we'll make sure that Dale might get on that and contact either our union representatives and see how we can get in touch and get some of those perspectives. Ilham, and then Mark. Oh, never mind. So just you.
Okay. So I think Mark kind of already asked this question. But so far we've only talked about positive to SROs. Are there any like negatives to having an SRO? And if so, what are they?
You know, that's exactly why we're gathering information from our community. You've heard people chime in on, you know, kind of the positive attributes and the reasons that they appreciate having SROs in the district. You've also heard some of the areas of concern. We have surveyed our entire administrative team, and we do have a list of areas for improvement. Some of those are around the concerns that Yadira has raised. There's concerns around, you know, what the appearance is and what that whole presence piece feels like. And so we are looking to gather additional information on that. And I do think this is a good opportunity for Dale to share the information that we are gathering and the manner in which we're gathering it to make sure that we have a representative viewpoints indicated in these survey results. So Dale, would you go ahead?
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, board, and thank you, principals, for chiming in and spending your time with us. I can attest to the fact that these are all people who are honest and would share their opinions without fear of me, whether that be positive or negative. So I'm thankful that you guys agreed to join. And Mike is right. We did do a survey with our administrators, and I think similar to what you've already heard, I think the clarity around expectation and just some concerns that it is a little person dependent, like how do we get it more consistent, sort of like what OJ was talking about, more visibility. A lot of our elementary schools in particular said we'd love to see them even more. And so ensuring that we kind of get schedules, definitely equity training. We can all continue on our equity journey, and they felt like that was a concern. And then there was quite a few people that felt like considering, I think Alex calls it a soft uniform, but more like a plain clothes uniform might be a little softer in their presence on a school site. So those are kind of the key ones. But they did say as a pattern, they really appreciated them being a consult or collaborative partner, that intervention piece, helping think outside of what we do in a school, but additional interventions within the community and the relationships. Again, like Berta was talking about, that K-12 connection with families and connection with our community. And time and time again, hearing they are way better than the street cops. They have specialized training. They understand development of youth. They understand schools more. And so that was a resounding comment that we heard in the data. So from that, I was tasked by the board and through Mike to work with a group to create a survey to get information from additional stakeholders. We obviously got information from our administrators, but we're here to serve kids. So we want to make sure that we hear the voices of our students, the parents that are caring for those students, and the staff that also are working with our students. So, and community members that perhaps no longer are students or staff or parents, but nonetheless have experiences with our SROs. So we kind of seized the opportunity to have Alex, Olga, and Morgan Quimby, who's our district system support TOSA. They were already working with a group in Washington County, and there was a grant for them to begin working through the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform through Georgetown. And so they were already kind of having a conversation and looking at the MOU for our SROs, but their charge through that group was really to look at our drug and alcohol protocol because we're seeing an increase in drug use. And I think Washington County, as well as our school system, has a real interest in thinking about how to create a diversion program or how to address the increased marijuana use. And you've seen that in our discipline rates as well. So that's kind of what they were already talking about. So we took that group and expanded it. We added additional administrators, licensed staff, classified staff, people of many ages, genders, races on that group to begin digging in and creating a survey that we could get out to our various stakeholder groups. So some of the resources they looked at were the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform, resources, the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform Law Enforcement Partnership resources, the National Association of SROs, the Community-Oriented Policing Services, and the Department of Justice SRO Implementation Rubric, to kind of look at best practices and some of the information that was out there in order to think about the different ways that SROs might be used and the different best practices that are out there in our community. And so they got together, created a survey. We ran it past a variety of stakeholders, including overtook it to the PAC. There were different groups of people that the team were connected with, so they were able to kind of get some input on that survey. I also helped Brooke kind of look at it and made sure that we were looking at each question to think about how that data would help us get the information we needed about how families, students, staff felt about working with the SROs. Thankfully, I've been taking classes on survey design, so tried to help redesign that to make sure we weren't using like leading questions, that we were making sure we were considering social desirability. You know, if you ask something like, do you think SROs are important? Yes, no. Socially, we kind of feel the pressure to say yes, because we sort of feel like we should. And so a better question is, between strongly agree and strongly disagree, how important do you see an SRO on a school campus? And then you kind of get a different kind of range, which would be more informative. So spent a lot of time kind of looking at the survey, finally boiled it 15 questions, and we created a version for staff, one for parents and community members, one for high school students, and then one for students ages 5th through 8th grade, paying attention to the language that was used so that we could make sure that it was comprehensible to people. And so on Monday, we sent this survey out globally through Hot News and also through our listserv for all of our staff members. And then we have a list of people that have natural connections already in our community that we're asking them to either do focus groups or do outreach to people. So it might be that I call Alex and I say, hey, Alex, you know, there's this SRO survey. I really want you to participate in it. Would you feel comfortable me sending it to you and you just filling it out? Or would you like me to talk through it? And I am happy to fill this out for you, but I think your voice is really important. So we're doing some very strategic outreach. We've also asked principals to call 10 students or families per principal to just make sure we're diversifying our group. And because we want to make sure that we're not all calling the same family, we created a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet so that if I want to call Alex, I click on it and pull down and I say, oh, look, Dave already called Alex and his family, so I'll choose another family. And so therefore we can continue to get, maximize the relationships we have, but also continue to diversify our groups. So we've had targeted emails and we'll have outreach in the next 2 weeks to groups like our Latino youth group, OICP graduates, GSA groups, etc. So we're really doing a comprehensive push to try to get as many diverse voices as possible in the data set. It is open until the 27th, at which time Corey Sakamoto, who was one of the members on the team, will do her magic and start crunching data. And the goal is to have data for you related to the questions that you asked in the last session for the board retreat on August 3rd. We did pay attention and we got feedback from our staff of color who said that at the last question, it was a pull down menu for what school you were located at. And we received information that some of them felt uncomfortable because they might be the only person of color in a given school and they didn't want to be identified. So we modified the survey within 24 hours to include just HSD staff or multiple locations. So that offered a little bit of anonymity, and people who participate in the survey can choose to identify their race, or they can prefer not to answer, and they can also choose to share their gender, or they can prefer not to answer. So we wanted to create a survey that would allow all people's voices to be heard, but also respect their desire to be anonymous if they so choose.
Thank you, Dale. So before we wrap up this item on our agenda and our conversation, there's of course more to come on this. We want to be having a really transparent process to our community, that we're addressing what we're seeing nationwide as well as in our own community, and making sure that we're addressing concerns and needs. I just want to do a quick maybe just roundtable from our board members and students reps in case there's any additional, and this is not more questions for our people to ask because we have to move on to our next item, but maybe if there's additional things that you might want to learn more about or hear more about in another session. And as Beth notified us in the chat, make sure that you're speaking a little bit slower to ensure that our translators are able to capture your comments. So I will just call as I see you on there. Let's have Jackie, Lisa, Martin, Mark, and then I'll call again the rest.
I want to thank the administrators for coming. I think your perspective was very useful for me, not being in a school, to understand the role from your perspective of our SROs. I had 3 points that I just, one of them was, I'm curious if there is a way we can document student interactions with our SROs in a disciplinary situation. So if there is a disciplinary situation where the SRO is brought in, how is that documented? Is it documented, or is it only documented if it's an arrest? I wasn't clear on that. I know you said no more questions. So this is just future information that I'm hoping to get. The soft uniform, I think that's, something that we may need to discuss, as well as possibly as we relook at the program, a different name from a school or student resource officer. I think it was David who said youth services or something. I don't know. It was something that popped into my head. But I want to thank you guys for coming because it was a great perspective.
Thanks, Jackie. Lisa?
Okay, hi everybody. So I don't have much new information to add or to request. I think that, we've kind of talked this out a lot and said the things that we want, and everybody's working hard to get that information, which I really appreciate. And I also, of course, appreciate the administrators taking the time out of their evening. It's not like they got to work probably a shorter morning or anything like that. So we appreciate you very much. Thank you. I guess what I would say is, we're talking a lot about SROs and maybe changes to the program or even eliminating it down the road. And I think it would be important for us to hear the voices of our SROs, which we haven't done yet, when we are considering changes, and maybe hear their thoughts on, we think the soft uniform is a great idea. I think I've heard that from almost every board member, including myself. How do they feel about that? Hopefully good, but it would be, I think, prudent to ask. That's what I would want or need moving forward.
Thanks, Lisa. Martin and Mark, you're on deck.
Well, in the spirit of just what's in my head, it's not necessarily a request for more action, but I'm just wondering if there isn't a nexus between the 15% who don't graduate and the SRO program. If we're trying to get to 100% graduation rate, I'm wondering if we have to do something different. It's just something I wonder. As I've thought critically about this program and listened carefully, these 9 people we're talking about may be the most 9 impactful people in the district. They have a disproportionate amount of impact, maybe for cause, but I don't know that you pick 9 other people out of the 2,000 plus who engage with our students on a daily basis that would be quite as high vis and quite as impactful. So there's a nursery rhyme goes around in my head. When they're good, they're very, very good. But when they're bad, they're the worst. And I'm not talking really about SROs, but I'm just talking about the impact. For most of us who are enfranchised, which is pretty much everybody on this call, we tend to look at the representatives of institutions favorably and see the good things. But if you're disenfranchised, they may be disproportionately impactful in a negative way, hence the nexus potentially with the 15% who don't graduate from our programs. So, I'm doing my best to listen and take it all in, and just see where this discussion takes us.
Thanks, Martin. Mark?
I think Martin's completely right that we are pretty enfranchised folks, and without hearing the voice of those disenfranchised people, I find it difficult to walk a mile in their shoes when we haven't really heard their stories to this point. I look forward to when we continue the conversation, to hearing from our community partners and our law enforcement partners. To Lisa's point, love to hear from some of the SROs or all of them directly. I also think, one of the reasons we're having this is because of the national conversation and how it's impacting our local community. And so one of the things I would like to hear from our community partners is, how, as they think about changing their vision for how they serve the community, as HPD or Washington County Sheriff, I think there's going to be pressure on them in the coming days, months, years to reevaluate their model of support in the community. And so I don't want us to get too far cart ahead of the horse and saying this is what we want from SROs when the department may be saying we are re-envisioning community policing this way. So I look forward to hearing that. And, sort of with that in mind, I guess I'll just close with sort of, I think we're all coalescing around a few ideas. I also worry, I don't want to be a tone-deaf old white guy who says, look, we changed the system because they changed their clothes. That doesn't seem like it's enough.
Thanks, Mark. Yadira, and then Devlin, you're on deck.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I really don't have any more information or like that to add to what we've already been talking about. But I completely agree with Martin, because I have had experience in HSD. I have a lot of family members that have gone through the system, and then also the experiences that I know that they've had. Kind of it's very different than some of the stories that I'm hearing right now. So there definitely is a disconnect, and I'm glad that we are having this conversation and addressing this. I look forward to hearing what we get back from the survey results of all the different stakeholders. So that will be good. But yeah, I like that we are covering possibly anybody that could have a perspective on this, teachers, SROs, students. So I think hearing from everyone is really important. But yeah, and regardless of which direction we go with, this is always going to be a difficult conversation to have. And but it is something that has to be done. So.
Thank you, Yadira. We understand the joys of working from home. Then we have Devlin, and then Maya and Ilham.
All right. I don't feel like I have any more information to really add or to ask about. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all. It's just if you had any additional information you wanted for us to gather, or any additional comments you wanted to make around this topic.
As far as additional comments, I would just like to say that I'm really happy that we're having this conversation about school resource officers and their current role in the Hillsboro School District. I feel like that I would like to hear more viewpoints, especially from parents and students, especially, definitely school resource officers, because I've heard I've heard many different things about this subject, and I would like to get a better general idea of what people are thinking and how they feel about school resource officers in general. And that's kind of really all I have to say.
Thank you, Devlin. Maya, and then Il.
Just to kind of add on to what Devlin was saying, I'm also very happy that we are having this discussion. I think it's very important. And I also wanted to add that I have been in the Hillsboro School District, elementary, middle school, and in high school. And I think it's important to help better the relationships with SRO officers or with the SROs if we continue to have them in our schools. And just from personal experience, I personally have never come into contact with an SRO that is bilingual. And I think that's an important thing to know. And if we're talking about tweaking things and having better relationships with kids, I think bilingual SROs would be very beneficial.
Thank you, Maya. We'll have Ilham next, and then Sheehan, you'll be after her.
So I don't really have a lot to say, but kind of what Maya was saying as well, having a bilingual SROs would be beneficial since, the Hillsboro School District is very diverse and many students speak multiple languages. I am looking forward to looking at survey results and having this conversation again.
Thank you. Sheehan?
Thank you. So I echo a lot of what my board colleagues have already mentioned. One new thing that I would add that came from some of the feedback the administrators shared is actually training for our administrators. I know that we focused a lot on trainings for SROs, but kind of to the point that I think, David, you had mentioned, when you're a new administrator and not really knowing when it's appropriate to call on an SRO or not. And I think that having some of those clear trainings between SROs and admins and some of those clear expectations is something that would be really beneficial moving forward. And so I would love to see how those trainings can extend just beyond our SROs, but really everyone who will be coming into contact with SROs. And I also want to thank Alex for your time and all of the administrators who are here. Thank you all so much for taking the time tonight.
Thank you, Sheehan. That was actually one thing that I had on my talking points on this topic was any bias training that we have. We know that there's a problem with our system because we see the data showing that it's disparate among our ethnic and racial groups in our school district. So we know there is an issue there. And so that's something that we have to address in our own administration, in our own district, and then also hold our partners accountable to the same. The other thing, back to a comment that I think OJ had mentioned earlier about, the experience with them in our spaces here and that relationship that our students build with them that starts maybe in elementary school all the way to high school. But how that contrasts to what they might experience outside in our community when it isn't an SRO, when it's somebody different. And so my concerns and fear around this program is we're kind of selling this idea of how law enforcement shows up to them and here, and they might have a different encounter outside that doesn't match up. And how do we address that? And how do we have that conversation with our partners as well when they come to the table, that this isn't just like a pilot program, but this should be how all of our students get treated in our community, whether they're in our schools or not. And so I think that's another conversation that we have to have with our partners and make sure that we're not creating something that, that gap for our students in reality and what they experience in our spaces in the district. Where we do have this ability to almost kind of build policies and parameters to protect them, but then once they're outside in our community, they experience something completely different. So I think all of our board members feel that responsibility of that whole child well-being, and not just when they enter into our doors, but also when they're outside in our communities, and how do we make sure that our students are safe. So more to come on this topic and conversation. I'm really appreciative of our administrators that showed up today and shared with us their candid thoughts and opinions, and thankful for that transparency, as well as our board members. So thank you all on this topic. So with that, we're going to move over to our next item on our agenda, which is our fall 2020 update.
If I can just thank Alex and Amy and OJ and Dave and Berta. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. Much appreciated. I know some of you are actually on vacation today, so this was an extra special day for you. Best day ever, I know. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience. Much appreciated. Thanks, guys.
So Mike and Travis, if you guys want to kick off the next item.
Yep, very good. Thank you. So we next are talking about opening fall 2020. We have been working on a plan that prepares us to meet the guidelines that have been set forth by ODE. And I know that all of you have seen those guidelines, and I want to say there's 37 pages worth of them, but I'm forgetting the actual number. But a lot of guidelines with a lot of 47. Okay, 42. Okay. So wanting to okay, there's lots of pages of guidance. So we've been, of course, poring over those and making sure that the plans that we're developing are in line with those guidelines. And we are well down that road with our work groups, and we're on track. We're on track to meet the guidelines that we have. There's many people that have put in countless hours on that, and really proud of their efforts and the tenacity at which they've approached this work. I do need to let you know, though, before we go into the opening, that due to the current state of the pandemic, there is, and the number of increases that actually exist in Oregon, there's a growing conversation throughout the state as to if we're going to be able to put this hybrid model into place in early September. Depending on how the trajectory of the pandemic develops, that hybrid model could be in real jeopardy. And so I've been in a lot of statewide conversations about this over the last week, and there's a lot of people that believe that they will be employing a fully online model to start the school year. That in addition to that, they would take a week and make sure that the teachers have a greater opportunity for professional development. Make sure that the connectivity issues and the equity issues for access to an online learning environment or a distance learning environment were well in place before they moved into that process. There's planning for online and then transitioning into the hybrid model at a later date. We've had some of the larger districts announce that they would not be offering hybrid or any on-site learning until potentially October. And that, again, that is a growing conversation that is occurring not only throughout the state, but in our immediate area as well. Just to be completely transparent, we are still hearing concerns from our staff and our community and from other districts regarding if we can safely implement this hybrid model. Like I said, we are meeting, we're working to meet those guidelines, and we are on pace to do that. But the evolving landscape and the evolving situation with the pandemic is definitely going to inform where we go with that. So, and even as I say that there's this consideration for starting in potentially a fully online model, in that growing conversation, we of course are weighing that against the needs of our students. We know that especially with our youngest learners, with our kindergarten students, our first graders and our second graders, that is the time period where they are learning to read, and having them on site and interacting with adults is the model, of course, that we prefer, and we prefer that in a big way. We will continue to work on our hybrid model. We'll also continue to work on our distance learning model and making sure that we're making improvements on that. And we'll continue to work towards both of those with the eye on ensuring that student and staff safety are at the top of our list. So we are expecting additional guidance from ODE next week, and we know that we're going to get additional guidance in August as well. One thing that we can be certain of is that we're going to remain We're going to need to remain nimble and flexible as we navigate through these waters because we know that guidance is going to change. We know that as the pandemic goes where it goes, that we're going to have to be flexible and there's going to be changes that occur. So with that as an intro, let me shift over to Travis, who will give an overview of our process. And then from there, we'll also have Dale and Beth share, just walk you through some of the specifics and some of the communications that we've got out there in the community at this time. So Travis?
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you tonight. The goal tonight is to update you on where we are with our blueprint process. August 5th at the board retreat, we hope to share a more comprehensive blueprint, and then we'll be submitting our plan to the Washington County Health Authority. And then on August 14th, we will be submitting our plan to the Oregon Department of Education. All those are requirements of the process. As you know, we're working in leadership teams at the district level. We've got a bunch of work groups on different areas of this, from transportation and logistics to instruction. And we have school level teams at every school giving input on this process. I think the board knows also that we're working with the district management group and the big 5 school districts around Oregon in an attempt to align our leadership and our communications with our communities across Oregon, and also to create continuity.
Hold on. Your audio is really compromised right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. I think you sound better now. And remember to slow down a little bit for our translator.
Well, thank you. Sorry, now I've got a bathtub running next door. It's just going to get worse from here. Can you guys hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Weird, I haven't had that problem before. Do you want me to start over or just keep talking about the work groups?
Keep talking.
Thank you. So what we want to do is create continuity and unity across our districts. We know that families live in Beaverton and Hillsboro and Forest Grove, and we want families to have a predictable experience and to be able to manage their students' lives and know what to expect in our region. So we're valuing that collaboration. It's also important to know that special educators and federal programs folks and dual language educators are collaborating across districts in levels like that, so that we know that students can maintain their programming as we move forward in a hybrid or distance learning approach. This week is a big week for outreach. What you're going to see tonight is where we are with a blueprint for an instructional model and a proposed hybrid model. Like Mike said, all these plans are subject to change and improvement based on feedback. We're being very intentional about reaching out to our PAC, our Native American PAC, Black and African American families. We have a plan to outreach to Asian and Pacific Islander families. Yesterday, we did an online live stream in Spanish. We had over 150 participants in that. Today at noon, we did a live stream for staff and had over 650 participants in that. Our goal is to have two-way communication. So we want to provide stakeholders in the community with information about what our plans are. We want them to be involved in those plans and then get feedback and input so that we know that although our plans don't meet 100% of families' needs, that we've had input. They've been part of the process and in the know. We also hope that you are in the know. So tonight what you're going to see with Beth is a presentation that we've done a couple of times now. We hope that we can get your input and feedback on this presentation. Those of us who are involved in it will be able to answer questions also after you see the slides. With that, Beth, please take it away.
Thank you. So actually we had over 800 staff members in the live stream today, which was amazing. That's about a third of our staff. So we were happy about that. Okay, I thought that I was sharing. Hold on one second. Let me present. There we go. Okay. Oh, for heaven's sakes. I don't want to share it. I just want to present. Present. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and take you through this presentation, even though several of the salient points have kind of been hit already, but I want you to see what our staff and community have been seeing in these informational sessions to kick off those sessions. So, oops. All right, so just kind of a basic agenda of what we're going to cover. And at a broad view, we have obviously been operating under significant restrictions since March of 2020 as a result of the pandemic. And in late June, the governor issued her latest executive order stating that in-person instruction would continue to be subject to restrictions. And she gave the authority to develop guidelines around those restrictions and guidelines for reopening to the Oregon Department of Education in consultation with TSPC and the Oregon Health Authority. Sorry, I'm trying to slow my speech down. So all districts across the state are currently developing their written plans detailing how they intend to comply with ODE's guidance. And these plans need to be submitted no later than August 15th. Currently, we have 8 different district level teams and school-based teams at every single school that are meeting weekly to work on various components of the plan, all the way from delivery of instruction to transportation to the control of disease transmission and more. And as Travis has aptly mentioned in other meetings, we are trying to take something that quite honestly would and should, if you really were going to try to tackle it, take years to figure out, develop, and implement. And it's being condensed into a period of about 6 weeks. So we're all working fast and hard. And I know there are lots of questions that still remain out there, but we've got wonderful people doing really great work. And we are going to ensure that our students are kept at the forefront of our planning. So one of the big pieces of the planning process is to get feedback from our stakeholder groups. And to that end, we launched a specific website, our Blueprint Planning website, at the beginning of July. And we have been putting out weekly updates every Thursday. And we will continue to do so at least on every Thursday, if not more frequently. This week was a good example where we provided an update on Monday when we shared this presentation and reiterated our meeting times for people to participate in. So we just want to make sure that people understand that we do still have lots of constraints that we're working within. Obviously, as Mike mentioned, the health situation and governor's orders at the time that we are supposed to reopen schools, the budget, which is still not finalized for us and won't be for a few more weeks, transportation, our ability to clean as often and to the extent necessary, and the possible need to be flexible between a hybrid model and a comprehensive distance learning model, and then union contracts and staffing concerns. So again, we need to be very flexible and nimble in our thinking and planning so that we can respond to these rapidly changing conditions. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Dale, who's going to talk a little bit more about the 3-pronged approach to instructional delivery.
Thank you, Beth. So I wanted to go over our proposed plan for fall instruction. So I want to start in the middle because we really are making sure that we think about the fact that no matter what happens, we're going to create comprehensive distance learning for all of our students. So we're spending a lot of time looking at the data. As you will recall, we looked at, we had surveys of family and community members, students, and also staff about their experience in the spring. So it's really driving what we need to do next in order to prepare for the fall. So we're offering comprehensive distance learning where students don't have to come in person, but nonetheless can engage with their local school and the teacher at their grade level, or if they're in high school, their content area. So students would be able to engage in the comprehensive distance learning every day. They're in their school. The teachers are creating the curriculum, so it can be geared towards the students that they serve and their specific needs. And if and or when we get to come back into our brick and mortar building, then students can return to school as soon as they're able and slide into those classes. The hybrid model, Beth, could you mute your thing? It's very airy. Could you mute?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you. The hybrid model is basically comprehensive distance learning. And when we have the opportunity to have kids in our space, that we would be able to help them go deeper with their content, to apply what they're learning, whether they're having a debate or doing a science lab, that it really is thinking about how we take all that good learning that they're doing in a distance environment and maximize the opportunity to be together. So our plan is for students to attend school at least 2 days a week in grades probably 3 through 6. We're trying to bring K2 or maybe K1 in every day, because we heard loud and clear from the data that those students were really struggling to be engaged online. And we know developmentally prioritizing helping our kids be readers by grade 3 is really important. And teaching reading is rocket science. That is not something that is easy for a parent to do. And so our hope would be to bring those students in every day. The other students would come 2 days a week or be invited to come if they can come 2 days a week. And students with special needs, or students who are emerging bilinguals or off track for graduation, or just in other ways might need a little extra help, could be invited to come for some segment of Wednesdays to have additional support and their needs met. The final option for families would be purely joining Hillsboro Online Academy. It would be their full-time option for the school year. As you know, Florida virtual curriculum, the Edmentum Odyssey-ware, those kind of package curriculums are kind of the foundation of the curriculum that we use at HOA. And some parents said that they would appreciate a more comprehensive curriculum structure. And so that would be an opportunity for families if they chose that. The learning is more individualized because students sign up for certain classes based on their level and need. And the intention would be that if students chose HOA as their school, that they would at least stay for half a year. And if school's open, they continue to stay for at least half a year. If they chose at the half-year mark, we could make some adjustments there. So those are the models. And Beth, do you want to talk about this visual?
Oh, there we go. So this is an infographic that I had Omar, my multimedia specialist, create. I know it's a little bit hard to read on a screen, and especially when it's a little bit compressed here, but it's just an attempt to kind of put on one page some visuals about what the 3 different prongs of the program look like. And there's some bullet points along with each to further describe the different pathways. And back to Gail.
Thank you. And so just to get a little more meat to the sample student schedule. So you see at the top, if we can get students in K1 or K2, the goal would be to have them in 5 days a week. It will probably be a slightly shortened day. Transportation of our students following the guidelines for safe transportation restricts the number of kids that we can have on a bus. So Carol and her team have been running all sorts of different scenarios, trying to find ways to run additional routes, like maybe in more condensed communities, or staggering the start and end times of the day in order to try to accommodate our dreams for instruction. In grades 3 through 12, you can see like the yellow cohort would come on Mondays, and they would also come on Thursdays. And then the other days they would be doing comprehensive distance learning. And then cohort 2 would come on Tuesdays and Fridays. And the other days they would be distance learning. I want to speak a minute to why that might look different than some of our neighboring districts. And in conversations, I'm really thankful that we're collaborating on our models because it helps us understand kind of the reason why they're making the decisions they are. But in the conversations that we've had, some districts feel like having Monday, Tuesday A day and then Thursday, Friday B day helps with continuity of schedule for families or for students or for teachers. One interesting aspect of that is, as it was explained to me, they would be teaching lessons 1 and lessons 2 to kids in group A on Mondays and Tuesdays, and kids in group B would be doing it independently at home on their own. And then they would all do distance learning on Wednesday, and then they would flip. So students who were in the second cohort would come and learn lessons 3 and lessons 4 on Thursdays and Fridays, and then the other cohort would be at home learning on their own. We think instructionally, it's a more sound approach to teach students on a Monday and say, I will see you on Thursday. I want you to do these activities, do these readings, watch these videos, prepare for this discussion with this think sheet. They come back on Thursday, you do the activity, you give feedback. That formative assessment is really important. Check in on how students are progressing. And then they go home on Friday with some more assignments, and then you see them on Monday. And it's the same sort of thing staggered for the Tuesday, Friday cohort. So instructionally, we think that's more sound. I've also heard that people feel like they can do deep cleaning on Wednesday if we had the cohorts separated. But our facilities department says that they're going to do deep cleaning every single day. The cleaning protocol is not going to change because students are going to go home, and so are staff to be with neighbors and family members, and then they're going to come back. So they still want to do a good job cleaning in between any group that might be using a common space. On Wednesdays, again, that gives us some opportunity to kind of create that, and we haven't had details around that specifically yet about what that might look like, but we know that it's an opportunity for kids who need a little bit more help to get that more help. I did get a question, Mark asked about curriculum, specifically what we would teach and what kind of research is out there around different models. So I can tell you that in terms of instruction, there is research around teaching and that formative feedback, whether that's like on a paper virtually or it's in person. And we think separating those days is more in line with the research around instructional best practices. In terms of how do you teach in a pandemic, surprisingly, there's not a lot of research out there. There is a book that just came out that is en route to our office so that we can read about some best practices around online learning. And we have a team of people led by Becky King-Smith and Arsema Travar really diving into professional development that our staff may need in order to be great distance learning teachers. They've separated per the feedback from the staff as well as their committee members. They've put the PD into 3 buckets, specifically looking at best practices in distance learning instruction. And we have really good resources in our own system. Linda and her team at HOA, we have some experts over there. Tom Luba came from Connections Academy and did some instruction at the college level around distance learning. So we have some good resources as well. The second is technology tools for that great instruction. And so Alano, Becky, and Arsema are really pulling some teachers together as well as doing research about what tools might be most applicable to serving our students' needs. And then the last PD that is needed is the systems and procedures to support instruction. We heard that a lot from all groups of stakeholders, how we could get consistent with the tools and learning management system that we use, as well as from a parent perspective, if you have a 4th grader and a 7th grader and a 10th grader, that Google Classroom looks the same, the way you communicate with teachers feels the same, and just really streamlining that. So one of the things that Mike had mentioned earlier was having kind of a soft start and taking maybe that first week that we are with kids to make sure we do that outreach, helping kids and families utilize the resources. We heard from some students even that they didn't know how to use Gmail or attach some of their assignments to things. You know, it looks a little different than Snapchat and some of those other social media pieces that kids use. So investing in making sure that our kids and families can communicate and get information about how their students are progressing is important, as well as ensuring each family has access to Wi-Fi and Chromebooks, and just really making sure that we all have the tools in place before we press go. It also gives teachers a little bit more time to collaborate. As you can imagine, not a lot of teachers have had deep professional development and best practices around the online education. I think our staff did an incredible job switching quickly, and they worked in PLCs and they were working on things, but that also leads to the second question about curriculum and what we teach. One of the really interesting findings that Becky was able to find is some research around how New Orleans post Hurricane Katrina, how the school system was impacted and the students were impacted during that interrupted education. And most students experienced between a 6 and an 8 month interruption of education, but because some of the area was not livable, they had to leave the area and then they moved back. So some of them experienced over a year of interrupted education. And basically the key findings were around math was the most impacted area, and we know that to be true. Math is one of those areas that takes a lot of practice and a lot of formative feedback, and so the greatest slides were in math. And they really found that remediating skills that kids might have lost didn't really help a lot. What they found is to stay on target with the standards, use quality assessments, and then scaffold and fill in and differentiate for kids. It kept kids more engaged and it helped them progress more quickly. But some of the research did say that 15 years later, they're still feeling the impact from their community by the loss of this interrupted education that students had. So I think one of the key things that we want to make sure that we do is support our teachers and having that time to do great lesson plans and collaborate with each other, because we're not going to be able to go back and hit every single standard. I mean, one of the great things about Common Core, especially with math and English language arts standards, is they spiral. And what I mean by that is, in 4th grade, you might see a standard that says students will be able to identify the interaction of characters on the plot. And then when you go to 5th grade, it will say students will be able to understand the interaction of character and plot and how it affects the resolution of the story. So they kind of spiral and build on each other. And so what will be key is our teachers having the time to look at the standards that students didn't have opportunity to have access to, and to make sure that we focus on those standards and do really good assessment to make sure that those students who already know those standards because they were able to engage in the distance learning in the spring versus those students who may need a little extra help get that help. I think, to be completely transparent, if it was like a chemistry class or if it was an art class and you missed large sections or you were unable to engage in that distance learning in the spring, it'll be very difficult and probably unrealistic for us to go back and hit all those standards that were missed. So I know giving teachers time, especially at the middle and the high school level, to have those conversations about if our students missed an entire quarter of chemistry at the end of the year, as they progress on to biology, is there any way that we can bring in some of those chemistry standards into biology and hit them? Because we're just not going to be able to hit every standard to the same depth that we were able to in the past. But we have momentum and some collaboration already occurring in at each level in different ways around bringing teachers together and starting to create some resources and tools that can be shared and just some space for them to start doing some of that assessment and curriculum mapping work.
Thank you so much, Dale. That is a lot of great information. So we're just down to the last few slides here where we are basically, so when we're giving this presentation for the public sessions, we are not stopping and giving that much explanation. Those slides are kind of described, and then we move on. So we're kind of saying, you know, at this point, what do you think? How do you feel about this draft plan? What do you like about it? What concerns you about it? What option are you likely to choose for your students, and so on. One of the interesting questions that we will be asking parents is that if you live in a busing zone, might you be able to transport your child to and from school? Because at this point, our ability to transport more students has a direct impact on the grade levels of students that we're able to serve in person. So if we can get more parents to agree to their own transportation, that will be significantly helpful. And then what additional feedback do you have? So as we've said a multitude of times by now, this is our week for public Q&A. So we've had 224 people participated in the Spanish speaking one on Tuesday, 800 plus participated in the staff session today, and I'm anticipating quite a large audience tomorrow for our general session. So, and also, as I believe Mike mentioned, we're having other targeted meetings for our pre-existing groups to make sure that we're hitting some of our affinity groups of families, our PAC, our Native American families, our Black and African American families, our Asian Pacific Islander families, also our SPED parents. I know that our Student Services Department is having a meeting for their families as well. And as all of that rolls along, we are continuing to work on the logistics of our plan. We are incorporating feedback and will obviously make any adjustments necessary based on the updates that come in the Ready Schools Safe Learner guidance. Those planned updates are coming out on July 21st, next Tuesday, and then again on August 11th. And again, state budget decisions will play a major role, as will the status of the pandemic in mid to late August and beyond. So we intend to reach out to each family with a kind of a multi-purpose survey to ask what model they are planning to utilize, what their transportation capabilities are, also to use that opportunity to do our online verification in hopes that we can really shore up the quality of information that we have for each family so that we are able to communicate with them. And our final plan will be submitted by August 15th. And again, as I mentioned, we're putting updates on our blueprint planning website.
You have a few questions, Beth.
I'm sure.
So the first one, I think Mark just typed it in the chat, was, is there any thought of having the distance learning cohort Zoom, or I think like beam into the in-person classes in the time sync way?
Yeah, I know that is something that Jordan and his team are working on, and I will dish to him to answer that.
We have been looking at this. There's a number of sort of technical pieces to that. You see that work done like in conference rooms or things with companies. Our systems in the classroom aren't quite set up that way. You know, we don't have like a Cisco telepresence type set up in all of our classrooms, and that would be incredibly expensive to try to do something like that. We do have audio systems and such, but trying to get those, there's sort of the basics of, there's 3 different types of audio systems in our classrooms. 2 of the 3 would allow us to pipe the teacher's microphone back into the computer and get that sound to go over the meeting. 1 of them would not, and that sort of just depends on the type of classrooms those were installed in and which schools have those. So. And there's also no way to get additional cameras like webcams. The teachers have a camera on their laptop, but those are really designed to only catch the first 3 feet out from them as for a webcam type situation. And there's just no way to order cameras. We ordered some cameras back in March and we still haven't received those. And the companies are saying they have millions of cameras on back order that they can't fill. So we're looking at ways that we can make that happen for certain situations, but there are some issues we're running into.
Thanks, Jordan. We have a question from Martin for Dale.
Thank you, Erica. I was in some really good equity training the other day, and it said the hallmark of a 21st century leader is vulnerability. And so I thought, are we candid with the community about really where the weak spots of this distance learning model is, and enlisting their support in a clear way? Like, if I'm a dad, what should I really be focused on, to do my part? And just being candid with parents about, the weak spots here. I think probably the people in the know where this system really is not going to work. And should we be more overt about that and really help people focus on compensating in the ways that they can, even though they're not teachers, parents or older siblings to younger kids? What should we be messaging about the ways we can shore up the limitations of our reality?
That is such a perfect question. And I think that's really why we want to take that extra time and connect with our families. We heard what didn't work for them. So that kind of creates a reciprocal accountability on us to figure out ways to address that. So whether that's like high school today said, we heard from students saying, I'm working, or I'm taking care of my siblings from 8 to 4. I need to be able to contact a teacher all the way up until 9 p.m., like a real teacher. So brainstorming ways that from that data, we can make sure that we serve our families. We also heard from families, if I don't know how to do this, I need help then, because if I can't help my kid on the spot, then they're frustrated, I'm frustrated, we shut the computer and we put it away. So how do we in our system create like a hotline, or how do they get on-demand support for their student right then? And so we're really trying to think through ways to do that, and then make sure that we have the time to go. And Olga and her team, they did a great job getting out to some families who said, we don't know how to use this computer. We don't know how to use the Wi-Fi. And it's great to do it one time, but we need to have a system where we're checking in with the Granum family over and over and saying, how's it working now? And I noticed your son didn't log in yesterday. Is everything okay? Are you having trouble with tech? Oh, you had a family issue. And just creating those systems. It was the number one thing. We were expecting people, teachers and families to say, how do we do the distance learning? But they really were asking for the systems and procedures for being effective online, getting the support they need, and making sure they understood what their role was as a parent or as a sibling, or what the teacher was going to be doing and not doing. And so all of those things you talked about, Martin, are exactly what we need to set up and get out to our families and students in the fall.
Thank you, Dale. I'll just add that I don't think I wrote any of my high school papers until after Johnny Carson was over. I started them about 12:30 at night, so a hotline available then might be really useful.
Let's also give Olga a chance to just share some of the outreach that she's been doing with her staff, and really working to understand some of the barriers that have been in the way of taking full advantage of the distance learning program. Olga, would you mind sharing a bit as well?
Yes, thank you, Mike. From very early in the process, I believe it was March, end of March, when my team started meeting frequently with parents online. We started with a smaller group, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger as they were able to access internet and Chromebooks. And so from the very beginning, when they requested trainings and help, they requested for help or workshops or videos on how to turn the Chromebook on, how to access it. My family liaisons were amazing at reaching out and really helping parents understand that process and how to log in and how to get in. And it got to the point where parents were helping each other and supporting each other. And so the level of engagement since then has been truly amazing. to the degree that they have requested more regular meetings. And so we have a meeting every Monday with them. And it's, I call it the meeting of the PACs, but Dorotea, my family engagement liaison, calls it Aprendiendo Juntos. And so when I log in, I'm just impressed with the number of parents that are online, 40, 50 parents online, truly engaged, asking questions from their homes, and so moving forward, they have asked if we were to go back to school in person, if we could continue to meet with them in that way, and so, or in a hybrid sort of a way. And so that has been impressive, how quickly they were able to organize and mobilize in a way that they had to learn a whole new system, and they wanted to know how to check in and ensure that their children were actually learning and they were online and they were not surfing the web. And so the learning continues, and the topics that they cover every Monday are selected by them. And so, yeah, I'm just super excited at that level of energy that they're bringing into the work that we're doing. We, as new information comes to us from the state regarding the blueprint, regarding reopening, we're sharing that information with them and making sure that we are getting feedback every step of the way.
Olga, just to follow up on that, is there a way that, as you know, I think as topics, as we kind of come to that reality that we're going to continue in this distance learning environment or hybrid, that we can create a library of these videos, kind of trainings for parents, so that they can always go back and kind of re-watch, or if somebody missed it, maybe they can refer and say, oh, I learned that topic or that subject, we covered it that day, you can find it here.
Yes, I believe that Dorotea is keeping a library of them, and there's only so much that we can put on the website, but there is a resource page for families already. She even created a Google Classroom for parents, and the liaisons, when they were here through mid-June, they were accessing that Google Classroom to support families and to take them through the trainings and things like that, to share those videos with them. And I think that is really great advice. Somehow, if we can create a digital library that they can access always, perhaps outside of our website, I don't know how we could do it, but I think that's a great idea. It would really truly help, especially during the time, like right now during the summer. It's a little bit more challenging to get all parents to participate because not all students are in school. We're trying the Monday Aprendiendo Juntos with the parents of the children that are attending summer school, but we're also reaching out to all other parents. But you can see that the level of participation is not the same as it was in March and April and in May.
Erica, before we continue, can I add one thing to Martin's question? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I want to take the opportunity that part of the question was how we should be messaging in the community. And in one of our equity-based conversations in our blueprint team, we were focusing on the assets of our community. And one thing that came up was that parents and families can really help us promote information around safety, hygiene, and even something as simple as the importance of wearing masks has become politicized. And we know that there are opinions about who should and shouldn't have to wear a mask. And it came up that in our diverse communities, that we can have a real leadership opportunity with our parents and community members in just promoting hand washing and mask wearing. Some of those things are not mandated at this point for children, but just building understanding around the science and around what our health authority is telling us. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think in your advocacy, Martin, and other board members, that would be a really important thing to let community members know how important their voices are in promoting that with their friends and neighbors.
Thanks, Travis. We have a question from Yadira, then Lisa.
So first question, have we thought about how we can reach out to like volunteer groups, or even like, for example, in transporting students to school, like, you know, can you take your own child plus like one or something like that? Or is that something maybe like parent groups can talk about in helping with that situation? So I guess just looking at the different community volunteer groups that are out there and seeing how and if they can help. My second question is about equity and in that kind of middle school range. So just I guess if we're taking a look at that, like maybe a student that is not doing well, that's in that like middle school group that's just going twice a day, like could certain students go every day that needed the help? Like, is there room for that, or is it just like 2 days because you're in this group or in this cohort?
Dale has a plan for that.
Dale has a plan for that. I think the goal is to try to serve students' needs the best we can. I think it's kind of dependent upon how many kids say they're coming in person. We're being asked to cohort kids as much as possible. And so there is additional exposure if, for example, a student at middle school that was struggling came on campus 5 days a week. That might be a concern. So we're hoping to at least have them there 2 days a week plus the one. And then I think depending upon how many staff we have, you know, we're still waiting for staffing. That comes next in your agenda today, but how many staff we have and what the capacity is, I think we are all in and trying to serve the differentiated needs of students as much as we can.
Thanks, Dale. Lisa, then Mark, and then Jackie.
Okay. I have a question and a comment. My comment is I really appreciate the ingenuity of looking at the data around Hurricane Katrina and like the loss of school time and trying to apply that to our current situation. I think that's brilliant. And I love that we have data that tells us that math is the thing that's going to slide the most. And I totally understand and see that as something that we want to focus on when we are able to come back in whatever way. I also am very concerned about the language abilities of our students who are in the dual language program and trying to learn a new language. You know, my children are trying to learn Spanish, and there's definitely been a slide in our home. That's something that we have a limited ability to support them with. And I assume there are families who speak primarily Spanish who are experiencing something similar. And so I just am very concerned about that. And I know that that's something you all are aware of, but I just wanted to voice that. I think that's important and a concern that I hope we can address. And then the question I have, which I know don't answer right now anyway, and we talked about this early on months ago when we were talking about voluntarily closing, right? Way back when, before it was an option, you know, what is the end game? Right. So Mike said before this whole thing as a preface, hey, the statewide conversation has shifted. We are aware now that there's a possibility we might not even be able to do this hybrid model. If that's the case, and we're going to be stuck in distance learning, I would really like to know what the statewide conversation is around the end game. I know that it's out of our control, but what are the conditions that they're wanting to see? Is it going to be a semester, a quarter, a whole year? Are we waiting for a vaccine? Is the vaccine going to be required? What is the end game? And I would really like to know that. So that's my question. Thank
you. Before we move on, I would say that we have actually 3 people, Olga, myself, and we have a student that's in that advisory committee at the commission to the governor on the Healthy Back to Schools. And the same questions that we're asking here, they're asking there. It's the same conversation about what are our metrics? How do we define success? What does it mean to go back in? And when is the flip switch to go distance learning versus not? Those are the kinds of questions that are also being asked. So I don't know that we have an answer yet, but we're at least in those spaces to hear those conversations. I don't know, Olga, if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, I agree with you, Erica. And from today's meeting, what I was able to capture was that as we move forward with the planning, that we really need to think about the end goal of going face to face at some point, right? And I think that is the ideal goal for everyone. And so as we plan for that, what are the steps that we can have in place, or what is the process that we can have in place, or interim plans that we can have right before we get there. Today they talked about what happens with an outbreak. We need to have a plan for how to address that. And how long will that take? Will it take 3 weeks, 4 weeks? And then can we go back to distance learning, fully distance learning from having been in a hybrid phase? And so they're wanting us to consider all metrics. And I think that, really it sounds like everybody's on the same page with similar concerns, similar recommendations that we consider, especially with the young children that need that social and emotional support and the social interactions with each other. That community of children has been hugely impacted because they are not, receiving the same level of support that they were receiving when they were in school. And so we really need to keep that student population in mind.
Thanks, Olga. So we have a couple more questions, but before we get to Mark, Sheehan, and Jackie, I wanted to give Beth an opportunity to share her screen, and maybe that might answer some questions. So I want to do that first.
Well, thank you. Let's see here. Oops. All right. First, I'd like to take you to the district website, and this poor alert bar, it was never intended to be a permanent fixture on our website, but there's, really no other way to keep something right up at the top of our website. So we keep our most important updates here, and we have a link. If I click this link right now, we'd be taken to this board meeting, but tomorrow when people click the link, they'll be taken to a waiting screen for the information session. So we are also planning to send out a reminder. Well, information about the session will also go out in tomorrow's blueprint planning update, and we're also planning to send out a text in the late afternoon, just reminding people that they have that opportunity. And then I just wanted to utilize the shortcut to our blueprint planning website, https://bit.ly/hsd blueprint fall 2020. And that takes you to our blueprint planning website. All of our weekly updates are on this page. I'm using my home computer for this part, a little slow, in both English, and then you can click up here for Spanish. And then we have the planning team updates if you want to get a little more nitty gritty about, oh, how is the response to outbreak team? What are they working on? Or what is the, what's the communications team working on, or the equity team. So those are there. We have our FAQ that is just a start. There, this could be honestly probably 100 pages long at least. And we are going to be adding more based on the types of questions that are coming in through our feedback module and through the information sessions. But, that takes some time, and we need to comb through those and get them organized and answered correctly and then posted. So we have our feedback module here, and it's in English and Spanish. People can submit their comments or questions. And then if you go to the resources tab, we have the presentation, we have the infographic, and then we have already the links to the videos of the information sessions that we've had so far. And then after tomorrow's session for the general audience, that video will be here as well. So it's a great website. It's all about the blueprint planning process, and it's kind of your one-stop shop for keeping up to date on how HSD is handling this.
Thanks, Beth. Mark, your questions, and then we'll go to Shannon and then Jackie.
Yeah, I mean, to Lisa's point, hopefully our end goal, top of the staircase is students back in classrooms every day, right? I mean, I don't know that every stair on the way there is built yet, but if we got to the top of the staircase, it would be students back in classrooms every day. So that's sort of what one of my questions is. If we're wondering whether or not the governor's office is going to allow us to have classes at the outset, I understand we have limited minutes before the school year is about to begin, and we need to spend those minutes on the things that are most important. But I don't think the hybrid work is wasted, because whenever we do end up transitioning back in, we will need to utilize. So I guess my first question is it pretty much everyone's expectation that when we can transition back into classrooms in some way, is the first step of that the hybrid model?
Yeah, Mark, we believe that whenever that happens, that there will be a transition period that will include a hybrid model.
Right.
That's the premise that we're functioning on as well. And it's one of the reasons that we will continue to build out this hybrid model, and we'll continue to focus on distance learning as well.
And with the some folks on this session probably getting annoyed by emails from me, but I'm a big advocate for taking stuff outside. We learn something new about this virus every 3 days or so, but it seems pretty convincingly that it's difficult to get outside. Not impossible, but difficult to get outside, or in big spaces, gymnasiums that are wide open with only 10 people in them, right? So I'm hopeful that, our SPED students, ELL students that almost require that day-to-day connection, that we be planning on figuring out how to use all of our spaces effectively, especially, if we do stuff in the fall when the weather's still pretty good in Oregon. Easy question. On the 3-column thing, if you choose the HOA track, I'm on the right, I guess this way, can you transition back into the classroom when classes go back in the classroom? Or if you choose the HOA track, are you in the HOA track for the year?
So we've thought it might be nice for staffing purposes if we at least get to like the half-year mark. So our ask would be if families commit to HOA, they are at least there for a half a year, because we would need to make sure that we have staff for students to move back. It's more of a staffing issue than anything.
Okay. And I'll try to cull my question list down. I guess the more thorough one, is anybody else extremely terrified about transportation?
One of the things that we expect to have additional clarity on as we get more guidance over the next couple months is around transportation. And transportation is a huge limiter for us.
Absolutely.
In fact, that is more than anything, that is what would that is what would guide the number of students we could get back full time. So K1 and, you know, kindergarten is one thing. K1, that puts an additional burden on transportation. K2, that puts an additional burden. So yes, that is a huge limiter throughout the state. It comes up on every conversation, and it's one of the reasons that you know, that we will ask for assistance in parents taking their own kids if they're able to do that. There's been conversations about, I hate to even say this one out loud because there's been no changes, but there's been conversations about what will walk zones look like? Will those expand? There's been statewide conversations around that. There's, as you know, there's all kinds of rules around that, and there's been no adjustments yet. But absolutely, transportation is the thing. Well, there's a whole list of things that are going to limit.
Sure.
There's actually 42.
That was scary.
Can I add though that Mark, the one thing that made me a little less terrified, we try not to use the word terrified as we plan.
Okay, sure.
But one thing that was very encouraging, and this is credit to Casey and Carol Hatfield and Michelle Brady and the team of nurses that are preparing us and training us. We chose not to do in-person learning for migrant summer school. We continue to do in-person learning for about 8 students with ESY, but we did the training with our drivers and our staff for migrant summer school to prepare for transporting kids to school. And the degree to which they created family-friendly tickets that had temperature check information and packets for families, and they were bilingual around what the expectations were and how to get siblings to seats together and how to space on the bus. All the training that I was a part of and that our staff were prepared to implement was really carefully done. And it is a limiting factor to spread kids out on buses, but I can tell you that our team is ready to do that. So if that helps with the what are we doing about transportation question, I think I would lead with that conversation about the training that we have in place.
And Kana, maybe you can chime in a little. Traditionally or recently, we've had trouble hiring bus drivers, but there's a lot of folks out of work. Do we think that that might not be as difficult as it used to be?
I think that we're still continuing. We still have a posting up for drivers, and we've had some interest. There's other components related to the DMV and the timelines for folks to get CDL testing done that are not until September. So some of those are the pieces that we're looking at as well, and looking into the possibility of, you know, if you were to bring in-house some of that testing. So lots of opportunity to learn and grow and expand on kind of what we've done and what we're doing. So
give me a lot of confidence that we got the right people doing the right thing. So thanks. If this turns into zombie apocalypse, you're all on my apocalypse team.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone. Sheehan and then Jackie.
Yeah, so my question is just, I guess, just a minor detail question. Dale, when you had shared that the sample schedule of the different cohorts coming on Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, what is that schedule going to look like for teachers? Does that mean the teachers are going to be teaching the same lesson twice a week? And, you know, I guess this might be a conversation that you might share later in terms of staffing, but do we have teachers so far teachers or even classified staff who are hesitant in coming back? And what would that look like in terms of our staffing numbers?
So I can talk about what it might look like, and then I'll let Kana talk about the feedback she's getting from staff thus far. So yeah, you're right. You would be teaching a lesson on a Monday, and then the students would go home for 2 days. You'd see them again on Thursday, and then you would do that again for the Tuesday, Friday cohort. I think what's important again, and this is one of the things that we're going to be working on with our school teams next week, is to really help our teachers flip the switch about what they're teaching, because teachers keep wondering, well, how am I going to get everything in? And there's just so much. And we're not trying to do school in 2 days. What we're trying to do is build a comprehensive distance learning program with opportunities for kids to come in and to get that feedback, to get those opportunities to interact with each other, do those cool science lessons, do the performances in the classroom. Like you really have to flip your head around what that looks like, because even in the best case scenarios, we're not going to have a full school day like we have, because transportation is going to take longer. Getting kids into the school, off the buses is going to take longer, getting their lunches is going to take longer. So, you know, as we look at the high school schedule, probably teachers would see students like taking biology maybe 1 hour on a Monday and 1 hour on a Thursday. So if you get the chance to be with kids for 2 hours that you're teaching biology per week, what are you doing? Like, you're doing some amazing, enriching sort of things, and all the like content learning and the reading and all those things are going to happen outside of the school day. So that's something that we're all sort of struggling with, is what does that look like? But we've got some good plans and some good professional development to help us get there. And then Kana, if you want to address the other question.
Yeah, happy to answer that question. So one of the things that we know with our staff is they all want to know what the expectation is. I think that's the heart of an educator. They want to know, they want to plan, they want to organize and implement things successfully. And I think the thing is, when it comes to safety, you know, there's a lot of unknowns around that. And so that puts people in this kind of space where they don't feel safe around those things. And we've had really great conversations with Jill and Melody, just talking about and processing those pieces. And so something that we put together is a return to work survey that we're having all of our staff participate. And just in 24 hours, we've been able to get 1,500 responses back from staff, which is incredible. And we're also looking at childcare needs, and kind of we added a component that Kelly Purdy and Brooke Nova and their team put together and embedded that into the survey to elicit that feedback. But I think, you know, we want to meet people where they're at and understand that we all are feeling a sense of worry around as we go into these things. But I always think too, like, we want to be responsive on how we do these things. And so that information through the survey is giving us more information so that we can have more enriching conversations on how to try to meet those needs. And the work that Michelle Brady and Casey and their team are doing around the operational components of what's going to happen and the PD that will happen around when you come back to school and what that looks like is, I think, also going to put people's mind at ease. It's the heart of an educator and wanting to know what's expected. And when they know those expectations and can meet those expectations, then their affect is going to be lower, and they're going to be able to serve the heart of our kids and meet the needs of our kids through that experience.
Thank you, Kana. Thank you, everyone. I know we're running behind on our agenda, but this is all really good content and really important conversations that we're all having to address. And I know that a lot of these questions are questions our communities are asking. The other, for me, I just wanted to ask back to the question about some districts, you know, deciding to start later or addressing that PD component, professional development for our teachers or our staff, and how we're flipping like Dale said, it's like we're flipping everything on its side and differently than what we've done before. And how much time are we giving, I guess, our staff and our both classified and licensed to kind of get a rhythm of what this is going to look like, maybe do some trial runs, figure out what's working and not. Also preparing our families to what is a cohort? What does it mean that your kid's going to be in a cohort, and running through that scenario before they actually start. So I wonder if there's already been some thoughts about us having to look at our calendar or figure out what makes sense for us.
All of those things that you just mentioned, Erica, are exactly why we're considering the potential of moving back the start day for kids. And even if that were a 4-day period, we don't want to burden families, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're prepared. And that would mean a professional development for our staff. What does it mean to be really good at online teaching? What does it mean to deliver culturally responsive instruction for all of our students? What is the PD that we can do around that? There's also work to do regarding what are the responsibilities of families and how do we help people understand what's a family responsibility, what is a staff responsibility, and get some clarity on that. So we also need to re-engage with students. It's been You've heard about the drop off that all districts have had regarding engagement throughout the spring, and we need to re-engage with families and have that touch point with them and reestablish that relationship. And that's why we would have that additional time. That's exactly what that would be used for. Dale, do you have anything to add to that?
Thanks, Mike. I just want to make sure I put that out there. And Jackie, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. I want to say I agree. I think I know we have the right people doing the right work here, and I want to thank them for that. I also know that we're all feeling the pressure to reopen the schools to help with economic recovery, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons that people are I feel pressured that we need to open the schools. But I don't want us to have any kind of false sense of safety because we still don't know a lot about COVID-19. And I mean, if we're being honest, the only plan, should we decide to, what we're going to do, the only plan that wouldn't change at all between now and when school starts would be the full distance learning. And I think that's pretty standard. We all, I think, can agree with that. I would hope that, I know we're waiting for guidance from ODE and the state and OSBA and Washington County. I hope that we don't wait so long and delay our decision that it negatively impacts our families even more than they're already being impacted. I don't know if we have a timeline on decisions. I don't think we do. I think everybody's in the same boat. I just want to make sure that we're not waiting so long for somebody else's decision that we, again, make it harder on our families and than it already is. Because I know from what I'm hearing in the community, and I've reached out to many groups asking for feedback, we need to know, right? I mean, and it's hard to not know what are we doing. I mean, the colleges have already decided and said what they're doing. And so I think that there's that added pressure as well. And I want to thank our Mike and our cabinet for being responsive to that. And one question I had was, my concern is the liability issue of reopening the schools with such a communicable disease and what that looks like. I mean, that concerns me a lot with the liability to our district if something were to happen, if someone were to contract COVID-19 at school and it not end well. And then I also concerned about substitutes, right? Do we have subs that are going to want to come into the schools? So yeah, I know that was a huge train of thought, but yeah, that was it.
I was just going to say thank you, Jack. I'm sure that we'll have more on this later, and you can address these questions at a later time. In an effort for us to wrap up our meeting, we're going to move on to discussion time. I know that we have a OSBA summer conference update from Jackie. And what I'll do is, since we have a lot of engagement and conversations, if you do have something that you want to add for discussion time, just please type in the chat room your name so I can call on you. Otherwise, we'll just wrap up after Jackie's completed her OSBA summer conference update.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. It was really great to be in that avenue, in that venue of online. It was more one-on-one feeling and more personal. I went to, I think, there were three sessions, 3 or 4 sessions, and then 2 general sessions. And I'll just kind of go through, and there were some major things that I wanted to make sure that we all knew. So the first one was just a chat with OSBA leadership. They talked about advocacy around the CARES funds and what other stimulus money might be coming in, 98 funds, that kind of thing. Basically, the governor says her highest priority in special session is continuation of school funding. I think we all know that. The next one was a general session planning for returning to school, key considerations for health and equity. So the Ready Schools Safe Learners document that OSBUA put out on there, and I pulled it up, but there's a version number, and they said that it's right now it's 1.5.8. So if the number 1 changes, it's major changes. If the second number changes, which is currently 5, that's minor changes. And if the 8 changes, that's just kind of tiny changes, I guess. Patch changes is what I wrote down. I'm not sure that's the right word. Just to let you know, when you go in to look at it, those are what the changes and the version means. And then I did a legal and policy update on sexual harassment, sexual conduct, and mandatory reporting of child abuse. So for sexual harassment, there are 5 laws that went into effect last year that directly affect schools, and many overlap with different policies and processes. The federal government also came out with a definition that is different than Oregon's definition. So, and I know HR is all around that. I just want to make sure that the board, because we're now mandatory reporters, understand that. There is a change, they said, coming to policy JBA-GBN, which will affect Title IX changes that go into effect in August. So I'm sure we'll be getting that soon. Under sexual conduct, there's new legislation in last year that there were key changes, including the definition to be more inclusive and comprehensive. So, and regarding mandatory reporting, board members aren't legally required to be trained, but are strongly recommended to. There's a free pre-recorded webinar on the OSBA website specific to board members. The PACE training, they do have a training, but it's not specific to board members. And I wanted to ask Lisa if maybe we could add that training link or information to the new board member training packet and booklet. And I also just thought
for Rose.
That would be cool.
She's the owner.
Oh,
of
Rose, I thought you said that would be gross, and I was not.
No, Rose.
Oh, okay. Yes, Rose. Thank
Lovely
you.
and wonderful smelling and beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry. And I don't know if we need to check and see if our student reps, how this affects our student reps, if they are mandatory reporters or not. So maybe that's something we need to ask. Oh, yeah, Mark, good question. The next session was school law for board members, COVID-19 version. Basically, it's the Executive Order 2016 adjusts what a quorum is. So it says that unless otherwise required by law, a quorum of the governing body of a public body and the number of its members required for affirmative action, blah, blah, blah. So it consists of a majority of its members, excluding those unable to attend because of illness due to COVID-19. So it changes the quorum requirements a little bit. So just want to bring that up. And that's good until the executive order ends. And then they also told us, and I didn't know this, and maybe you guys do, policy BBF, suspension of policy. So there are times where we may need to suspend one or more of our policies, like public comment at board meetings, because right now, how are we managing our public comment? Has that changed? So if it comes to a point where we need to suspend some of those policies, we can with board action. We need to set a time limit for the suspension. So that's just something that we might want to think about. The last one was a general session on fall athletics, an update from OSAA. They had Peter Weber there. He did say that, private clubs are making up the difference for our school sports, but that's also increasing the disparity of those who can participate. So they are well aware of that, and that made me feel, a little bit better. The OHA and the governor's office is going to be dictating what OSAA can do. Right now, they're looking at other decisions that the states have made around us, like Washington and California. The fact is, not all activities will be able to go through this fall. Not all areas will be able to participate. July 20th and 22nd, is the executive board meeting for OSAA. And then they will send an update out to member schools by the end of July. Hopefully they'll have some more concrete directives. Right now, the first scheduled official practice for fall season is August 17th. They're hopeful that will stay, but it's not confirmed. So, and they're rolling out a new STAR initiative. I don't know if anybody's heard of this. I'm sure that Casey has. It's safety, tolerance, acceptance, and respect. And it's about equity and civil rights in school-sponsored activities. Oh, thanks, Mike. Perfect. He says, Mike's on the executive committee for OSAA and will keep us posted. That was pretty much it. I did tell them that I thought that the virtual avenue and forum of training is great because I think it's more inclusive of smaller districts that aren't able to attend a 3-day conference in Bend. They don't want to spend the money because they have a smaller budget. They don't see the value in it. But this gives them an opportunity to participate in training. So it was really great, and I'm really glad I went. It was 4 hours, 5 hours, but really great. So thank you for letting me update you. I know I tried to go quick. I hope I didn't talk too fast for the translators. Ooh, sorry.
Thank you. So I don't see anybody's on here having any additional comments or thoughts. So our next meeting is at our board retreat. And if Mike, you captured those last comments, there were just questions around where we're going to have that. I think because things are changing all the time, as we get closer, maybe we can give it in a board update if that changes our location. Okay. And I'm looking at Mike. You don't have anything else before we?
No, I was going to try and get some clarity on whether you wanted an in-person venue for the board retreat or if you wanted it virtual and just get more of an opinion on that. But I think we can wait a couple weeks and then make a decision based on where things are at that time.
Yeah, I agree. I think for the most part, most of us had agreed that we wanted to have it in an open space where we can practice physical distance. But as things are changing, we have to keep that in mind, and that might not be a possibility, but we'll keep the board updated. Thank you, everyone, for the hearty discussion and all that information. Have a great evening, and this session is over. Thank you.